What's going on, everybody? This is John Jake Gaming on the mic here, coming at you with a new season of NCSL college football here, exclusively on the college football revamp mod. Last season we did see USC win the national championship, and it begs the question, will we see a new national champion, or will USC be on a premise of a actual dynasty? We're gonna find that out as much more in this episode, as we are going through the entirety of season number 6 in this one. So I hope you guys brought the popcorn out. We got another long one, but we're here for a good one as well. If you're excited about this, man, make sure you go ahead and smack that like button, and then also hit that subscribe button as well if you do happen to be brand new to the channel. With that being said, let's get started with some of the notable preseason items. So we start by taking a look at the preseason top 25 just to get a feel of who might be given a legitimate shot of winning a national champion. This year, it seems like Texas is going to start out as the preseason number 1. They finished in the top 5 last year. USC, who is your defending national champions, are starting out at 3 as well. Miami is at 6. They made it to the college football playoff as an independent school. Navy is here as the two-time defending actually Conference USA champions. Ole Miss, who won a national championship in year number 4 but missed the playoffs in year 5, they're back in the top 10. Michigan is also in here at the top 10 as well. They made the playoffs as well. And then here's what the rest of the top 25 is looking like. Florida State could be a sleeper to win a national championship this year. They've been so close to making the playoffs the last couple of years, but it just has not panned out in their particular direction. Surprisingly, Troy is in here, but Troy might be one of those candidates to regress. They had an excellent year number 5, making it to the Sun Belt Championship game, but with a lack of defensive explosion, they could struggle getting stops this season. So Troy, who knows if they'll actually remain in the top 25 or not. But now let's go into each individual conference real quick to see who might be the favorites to win here in year number 6. Starting with the ACC, the Clemson Tigers are the favorite. They made it as an independent, at large. Virginia Tech is your defending ACC champions, but a lot of teams that have a shot this year. Your North Carolinas, Virginia, Duke, Wake Forest, South Carolina has been resurging as well, and then Charlotte has been a solid program in its own right as well. So the ACC could be an interesting conference to watch, especially in the second half of the season. In the American, however, it seems like Nebraska is the heavy favorite to win the American Conference this year. Iowa is at 2nd, but Iowa's probably a year away from competing for an American title from a program perspective. In the Big 12 is once again leaning heavily towards Texas. If someone other than Texas wins the Big 12, I would be massively surprised. In the Big 10, it looks like it's probably going to go either between Ohio State or Michigan. Everyone else seems like they're playing for 3rd place because there is a huge gap between 1st and 3rd right now. I can tell you what. In Conference USA, however, it seems like we'll have a healthy amount of competition. At least that Navy is going to have to deal with. Army is a pretty solid program, but so is the likes of Pittsburgh and the Penn State Nittany Lions, who are also ranked in the top 25. The MAC is always an interesting spot in the Midwest, but looks like Notre Dame is a heavy favorite this year, with Louisville, who was your huge surprise in season number 6. While they are getting more respect this time around, Louisville at the same time, I don't expect them to repeat for the MAC championship. The Mountain West also has some volatility in it as well, but it looks like it could be a 3-team race. Colorado State, who made it to the Mountain West Championship game last season, and then also Colorado and Arizona providing legitimate challenges to the CSU Rams as well. Of course, the Pac-12 is going to lean heavily towards USC, and then with everyone else essentially playing for second. In the SEC, it might also be a return of the status quo, as Miami and Georgia are the class of the SEC this year, with there being a clear tier after these top two teams. And then in the Sun Belt, LSU looks like to be the favorite this season, with Ole Miss looking to challenge as well after they did disappoint a little bit back in year number 5. But we get into year number 6 action right away, starting with week number 1, and already we have some interesting scores happening. Nebraska is able to beat NC State, but the Wolfpack providing quite the challenge as it required overtime for Nebraska to earn their first win of the year. Arizona is going to pull a stunner from the top rope as Clemson was shut out in the second half. That means Clemson is going to drop from their number 11 spot after this loss. On College Game Day, Miami also manages to get shocked in their opening matchup against the Auburn Tigers. Auburn wins a defensive slugfest 17-13. And then the Iowa Hawkeyes get things started, taking on a former Big Ten team. It's beating Illinois 26-10. So that first game of season number 6 is going to take us out over to West Point, where we'll see number 23 Wisconsin taking on the number 20th ranked Army Black Knights, as we'll go ahead and jump in midway through the first quarter as that pass is somehow completed, thrown off of the back leg, and yet still able to get enough oomph on that ball in order to complete a pass in the first place. So a very lucky play for the Army Black Knights, and it sets up a goal line situation where 3rd and goal coming up as Army's going to try to punch into the end zone, and that's going to be your first touchdown of season number 6 of the NCSL, with Army taking a 7-0 lead out here in West Point. However, later on in the first quarter, though, Wisconsin looking to answer back as Mark Silva is going to keep it on the read option, is able to pick up a decent chunk of yardage there, picks up 6 yards on the read option. We'll see if they go back to that later on in the drive, but instead Mark Silva's going to pass, throws over to the tight end who's still on his feet and is going to punch it in himself. Touchdown Wisconsin, and the Badgers will not take too terribly long to respond themselves. So a tie ball game through 1 quarter of action. Let's see if we have a lot of the same here in the second quarter, as it does seem like both teams are actually trying to feel each other out a little bit. You know, not pulling their biggest punches, at least as of yet anyways. But it seems like we might be starting to see that as Wisconsin goes in the ISO formation and is able to will their way into the end zone for that touchdown. And then later on in the second quarter, Wisconsin actually has a chance to really make this a 2-touchdown game if they wish to do so, and if they can execute yet again here in the red zone as they go back to that run up the gut, and is going to be able to pick up a first down. So goal line situation coming up. Silva dropping back the pass, is looking to scramble and is going to be sacked in the backfield, so it's going to make this goal line situation a little bit more difficult. They get back with like a couple of yards in the 3rd and goal, but once again Mark Silva is going to find Smith in the back of the end zone. Another touchdown for the Wisconsin Badgers, and ever since that Army team did go up 7-0, Wisconsin has answered back with 21 unanswered, and they could possibly make it 28 here. Silva again drops back, looks over to the left-hand side, and finds a receiver in the corner of the end zone. Touchdown Badgers! And Badgers take an incredible lead, a commanding lead, and it might get even more commanding here very shortly. Another goal line situation. Then can they go 5 for 5? Look, a good Five Guys meal. Yes, they do. Another touchdown for Wisconsin, and that was all she wrote, as the Badgers would go on to win convincingly 35-7 and trying to send the message early. Meanwhile, we did also get a studio update during that game, and USF is able to win their first game of the season. They beat the Nevada Wolfpack 35-25. But it does seem like we did not have to wait very long for volcanic eruption week to happen in the college football season. For starters, down goes LSU. They drop their first game against the Air Force Academy in overtime. A huge shocker here in week 1. But that was not the only shocker that happened in college football, as Ohio State is going to leave Eugene, Oregon with a shocking loss of its own. Oregon beats Ohio State 44-31. Plus, the Georgia Bulldogs drop their game against Coastal Carolina, as the Chanticleers are able to walk into Athens and get a massive W as well. USC is a notable exception though, as they're able to handle business against Maryland 48-21. Michigan is able to do the same thing against Syracuse, as the Wolverines win 38-21 in their opener. But then things get a little bit crazy yet again in the late night. As remember, we just talked about how Florida State was a sleeper for the national championship. Not after they played today. They lose to Tulsa 42-35 in another major upset. Missouri, on the other hand, not only pulls an upset off against a top 25 team, they beat the crap out of that top 25 team, as Missouri beats Baylor 51-24. And of course, the Nittany Lions are able to beat Lake Forest 35-28 in the All-State kickoff. And because of all the chaos that we actually saw unfold, that does mean that, hey, that we have quite a bit happening here in terms of, shakeups in the polls. For example, San Diego State, after they handle business against Eastern Carolina, they move up 3 spots to number 4. Ole Miss is now in the top 5, with Michigan narrowly getting to the top 5 as well. Florida is a number 7 team after a 3-touchdown win over Georgia Southern. Virginia Tech, who didn't even play last week, they get to move up 7 spots because reasons. Ohio State's down because of their loss. Iowa's up 6 after their game against Illinois. Meanwhile, elsewhere, we do get to see, Minnesota move up, Texas A&M move up after a 3-touchdown win. Miami, they're down to number 13, so they should still be okay. But Wisconsin is a major beneficiary of last week because they did have that impressive win over Army. Going to this bottom half, we do see that LSU is in here. They did drop 13 spots though. Pittsburgh is up 5. Troy is up 5 as well. Coastal Carolina gets ranked. That's the first time we've seen Coastal Carolina ranked in this series. They move ahead of Georgia, who did, of course, lose to the Chanticleers. Oregon also entered the top 25. Clemson is barely hanging on, as is Navy, after they were shocked by Iowa State to start the season. And then Missouri and Arizona both get to enter into that top 5 all as well. So a lot happening over the course of this week. One more thing of note as well is that Georgia Tech did also leave the top 25 because they also lost their first game of the season as well. However, that being said, Georgia Tech is still receiving votes, so if they win a couple of games here in the next couple of weeks, we should see them back in. But now we move ourselves forward into week number 2, and we didn't have any top 25 matchups, but we did have some top 25 teams that did play. Notably, we did have Ole Miss, who is now off to a 2-0 start after they take down Central Michigan at home 59-10. As for the Florida Gators, they're also going to be able to come off on a 2-0 start. They do so by beating fellow Florida school USF 31-17. The defending national champions USC also took on a generic FBS school and won by 40. But after that, we had a couple of more shockers. Virginia Tech, had all of this hype on them, top 10 before they were even in a game. Well, they were proving quickly that they are overrated, as Fresno State beats them in overtime 35-28. The Bulldogs are still perfect. But an even bigger shocker is that LSU not only lost their first game of the year, but they dropped to 0-2. 42-24 is your final score as the Mississippi State Bulldogs pull off an upset. The Miami Hurricanes were also able to win their first game of the season against their FCS counterparts, and Georgia will be able to win their first game of the season as well, as they beat Vanderbilt 27-13. So while week number 2 wasn't as crazy as what we saw back in, the first week of the season, we still had some movement that happened. Iowa was able to move up a couple spots, as did Texas A&M. Miami was able to get the benefit of the doubt, as is Wisconsin, who is able to continue its slow climb up the ranks. Pittsburgh is 2-0 to start the season as well. They move up 3 spots, and they have a date against USC. Should be a pretty big non-conference matchup for the Pittsburgh Panthers. Coastal Carolina continues its strong start to the year as they move up 4 spots to number 14 in the nation. However, Virginia Tech falls 7 spots to number 15. In the bottom half of the top 25, you got Georgia move up 3 spots, as did Oregon. Clemson is also able to recover by blowing out New Mexico. They're up to 18. And then we have some teams that are entering in as well. Fresno State ranked in the top 20. And now they got to go play against the Michigan Wolverines. Should be a fun matchup to watch. Rounding out your group for now is Penn State at 20. Missouri at number 21. Memphis, who is also in the top 25, as they took down Troy on the road as well. So you do love to see that. However, for the time being, the Troy Trojans will remain ranked in the top 25. So here we are in week number 3 already, as USC is getting ready to make the cross-country trip to take on this Pittsburgh Panthers team. And both teams are 2-0, but we've seen Pittsburgh get off to these quick starts and, get ranked pretty highly here in the top 15, 20 in the country, only to falter later on in the year. So can Pittsburgh beat the pretender allegations, or is USC going to once again expose this Pittsburgh Panthers squad? We're going to find out, and so far, seems like those allegations might be true there, buddy, as USC is quickly going to get up 7-0, and Tony Mitchell almost wills his way into the end zone as well. He almost has his first receiving touchdown of the season, but instead it's going to be Victor Spence on a 3rd and goal, running it into the end zone himself. Pittsburgh tried to bring the blitz, but it did not work at all, and now we're looking at a 14-0 lead. That being said, USC really could be running away with it, so if you're a Pittsburgh Panthers fan, you might be looking at a danger zone moment here. Really need to get a stop here on defense, at least hold them down to a field goal, because if not, oh buddy, it's going to be a long day for your squad, man. So here we are, 3rd and 5, key play here early in the second quarter. Spence has all the time in the world to throw and eventually finds Patrick Hill in the end zone. It's another touchdown for USC, and it puts them up 21-0. So that being said, we're going to click over to the 4th quarter. Pittsburgh, while they actually get themselves onto the board at this point, they are going to try and, they're trying to keep them at arm's length here a little bit, as Spence wants one more touchdown, and he's going to get it. He finds Patrick Hill once again. So a 30-burger for the USC's Trojan squad, and while Pittsburgh is going to finish on a high note here, really nice throw in the corner of the end zone to Kevin Rogers. It was just too little too late. Pittsburgh did all their damage in the second half, but by then, USC has been able to pull away, and now we get into the other top 25 matchup that we have to have here this week. Fresno State also doing the same thing. They're making that cross-country trip over to Ann Arbor, taking on the number 6 ranked Michigan Wolverines. Michigan coming off of a very good season last year, made it all the way to the quarterfinals of the college football playoff. Fresno State trying to show that they belong with the big boys here today. They're off to a 2-0 start themselves, ranked number 19 in the country right now. So lots of love for this Fresno State team, but can they prove they belong though, as Jeremy Huff will be able to go ahead and find the end zone. Another touchdown for the Wolverines, and quickly Fresno State well, they might be getting exposed as well, as Mario Sims catches another pass in the corner of the end zone. That's a touchdown for the Wolverines too. And Fresno State quickly showing that they were not ready for the big boys at all, as Michigan makes quick work of the Bulldogs, winning 49-14. That being said, we do get a quick studio update as Colorado State is able to stun Washington on the road. The Rams are now off to a 3-0 start after a 41-38 win over their big brothers to the northwest in the Washington Huskies. They suffered their first loss of the year. And then in terms of another studio update, Texas A&M is actually ranked. That's a surprise there, and gives Kansas State their third loss of the season already. Now, while the top 25 matchups that we saw here in week number 3 did not necessarily raise any eyebrows, that being said though, we certainly have some eye raisers around the country. How about Georgia State able to get a big time win in the horseshoe, as Ohio State, who had these expectations of being back in the playoffs per usual, they start the season 0-2 all of a sudden. Could be some smoke in Columbus. However, the Texas Longhorns show why they are currently ranked number 1 in the nation, as they took on a streaking Texas Tech squad. However, that momentum will screech to a halt as Texas was able to dominate. In other news, the Georgia Bulldogs are going to be in serious danger of falling out of the top 25, and that was because they lose to USF. The Bulls win 33-21 as USF gets off to a solid 2-1 start. And then to wrap things up, we did have one more upset happening, and that was Minnesota beating Wisconsin 49-41, and we had a lot of overtimes to try to sort this one out. Matter of fact, it took 3 overtimes to get it sorted out. It was certainly a classic that won't be forgotten in the Twin Cities soon. But even though Texas did end up dominating in their matchup against Texas Tech, we still had a new number 1 team in the nation. USC is your new number 1 team in the country. They surpassed Texas in the polls. Granted, they did beat a ranked opponent, so I will give the pollsters a benefit of the doubt. Miami, on the other hand, is also getting that benefit of the doubt, as they're the highest ranked one-loss team in college football. They're coming in as that number 7 seed. Texas A&M is up 3 spots as well. And how about the Chanticleers as well? Up to number 8 in America after a 23-21 victory over UTEP. Florida's going to move down a couple of spots. Virginia Tech moves up 5 after a shootout win against Hawaii. Iowa is down 3 after they lose to Army. Oregon moves up 5 after their win against Chattanooga. Clemson is up 5. Then we also on the bottom end have Penn State, ranked number 15 in the nation. Wisconsin is down 4. San Diego State loses a shocker to Boise State, so they're down 13 spots because of that, but they are still ranked for the time being. And then rounding out your group, you got Missouri at 18. Army, who is now in after they beat Iowa. You got Navy, Arizona, Minnesota. Meanwhile, Minnesota is in at number 22. And then you have 2 more newcomers in Colorado State at 24. And the Arkansas Razorbacks, who get in at number 25 in the country. And with that, we kick off week number 4 action with a couple of wild thrillers happening around the country. How about Oklahoma taking down number 7 Texas A&M in a shootout of the ages? 53-47 does end up being your final score, and as you can see, it took 4 overtimes to try and settle this one out. One truly for the ages. Meanwhile, the Memphis Tigers show their reasoning why they should be in the top 25 now, as they take down the Ole Miss Rebels. Ole Miss drops their first game of the season, and they do it at home, losing by a couple of touchdowns. Meanwhile, the Texas Longhorns continue to roll through the early part of season number 6, and they do so by taking down North Texas 37-20. The USC Trojans also flash their dominance as well, as they blow out the Washington Huskies. They win by 30+. But for the Georgia Bulldogs, starting their year 1 and 2, this was a must win, and they certainly got it here. Georgia able to pull out a close one, winning 30-24 on the road. Miami drops their second game of the year. Also looking to redeem themselves is the Ohio State Buckeyes, who recently fell out of the top 25. Well, they finally got their shit together. They beat Arizona by 35 points, which means Arizona's trip in the top 25 is going to come to an end quickly. And then, of course, the Oregon Ducks are going to remain undefeated on the season, handling business against Stanford 40-24. The Cardinals are still searching for their first win of the season here in year number 6. That being said, Wisconsin starts to get on the back end of their non-conference schedule, so American games are starting up, and Wisconsin has yet another top 25 matchup on their hands. This time, they do get to be back at home. They don't have to make the trip to any other stadium in the country, but they are hosting a top 5 team. They're hosting the Nebraska Cornhuskers. Nebraska also having some good playoff success themselves. Nebraska making it to the quarterfinals of the college football playoff. So let's see what this Wisconsin team can do against Nebraska. And so far, Wisconsin doing more than just simply holding their own. Mark Silva's already has a couple of touchdown passes. And maybe Wisconsin is a team that could get some serious consideration for the college football playoff when that time comes, especially if they continue to play like this. I mean, this is impressive. Not only taking the lead against the number 3 team in the nation, but also to go about going ahead and having a dominant lead over that same ranked team in college football. But with that said, there's still plenty of game left to play. So certainly far from over here, as 3rd and goal's coming up. Nebraska lining up in a quick triple option as Glenn Mason, the fullback, is going to get a little bit of love. You always love to see those fullbacks getting some extra love, and eventually Nebraska actually does claw its way back into the game, and so much so that Nebraska actually ties Wisconsin, and we actually are forced to go into overtime. So 21-all. Wisconsin had their chances to win this game in regulation and just couldn't get it done. Now it's going to come down to just a couple of possessions here to see who is going to come out on top. In Wisconsin, I'm sure they're going to want to avoid going 0-2 to start American Conference play, and that does not help as Justin Jackson makes a catch in the air using that vertical. And so Wisconsin is now going to have to respond with a touchdown of their own. Silva looks over to right-hand side and finds Charles Morgan for a 17-yard catch. Sets up that goal line situation. Nobody around him, so if he was able to stay in bounds, he might have had a touchdown there. Doesn't hurt them too much, though, because Adam Smith will find the end zone, and it's Mark Silva's 3rd scoring toss of the day. So that means we will have a second overtime here. And in the second overtime, Wisconsin is actually going to start with the football here. 3rd and long coming up, though, and I'm sure Wisconsin's going to want to pick up this first down. Silva's going to fire over the middle, though, and finds Charles Morgan into the end zone. Touchdown, Badgers. And Mark Silva is going to set a school record for most passing yards in a career. He's probably going to be the first quarterback with 8,000 passing yards, barring a severe injury. So congrats to Mark Silva there. And now, all Wisconsin got to do, keep him out of this end zone. And Nebraska, well, they had other plans. Wisconsin will not be able to hold the Cornhuskers down. They'll find the end zone themselves, so that takes us to a 3rd overtime. Now, in the 3rd overtime, things do get interesting here, though, as Nebraska is forced to settle for a field goal, so all they have to do is at least get a field goal themselves and keep the game going. They couldn't get a touchdown here, but this would send it to a 4th overtime, but it's no good. It is mislined to the right, and that's how it's going to end. So a look into the top 25 polls going into week number 5, and we are starting to get a little bit of stability at the top, but we still have a lot of change happening at the same time. Florida's up 4 spots after they beat UAB, for example. Virginia Tech, they blow out Kent State, and they're in the top 10 firmly. Iowa's up 4 as well. Oregon, Clemson, those schools all get up 4 separate spots. Ole Miss did, however, suffer their first loss of the season. They fall 6 spots down to number 10 in the country. Meanwhile, Pittsburgh, they recovered from their loss against USC in the previous week. They bounced back and win heavily against Old Dominion. Penn State, they blew out San Jose State. Miami, they had that surprising loss against Georgia. Texas A&M also had that shootout loss against Oklahoma. San Diego State moves up a couple of spots, a close one against Northern Illinois. Missouri up 2. Oklahoma is among several teams that actually get into the polls at this point. Oklahoma is the highest of these newcomers. They come in at number 17 in the nation. And that means that there are several other newcomers as well. Memphis coming in at number 21. Georgia is back in at number 22, even though they're just at 500 here in the season. And then, of course, Ohio State is back in after they finally win their first game in the season. And rounding out your group is Coastal Carolina. The Chanticleers are still here, but they have taken a tremendous dip after losing to the lowly New Mexico Lobos. But now, let's go ahead and jump right into week number 5 as we do end up seeing the Michigan Wolverines continue to roll. They took on Virginia, and the Cavaliers were simply no match as Michigan wins easily 59-24. That being said, in a battle of opposites, Texas does what they're supposed to do as well and beat Kansas State 37-13. The Wildcats are still searching for their first win this season as they are now 0-5 here in the first 5 weeks of the season. Florida is also able to continue to handle its business as they beat the Kentucky Wildcats 40-17. Florida cementing themselves further as a top 5 team in the nation. And then, of course, we have the battle of the Cy-Hawk Trophy with Iowa in a close one with Iowa State, but the Cyclones ran out of gas in that fourth quarter as a 20-6 lead in that fourth quarter leads to Iowa's third victory of the season. And also, we do check in on the defending national champions who have not lost a single game yet this season, and that will continue as they beat Washington State 52-28 being your final score. So this takes us into one of the best rivalries in college football from a historical standpoint. We got the Army-Navy game. Both teams coming in with solid records, coming in at 2-1. And nothing like a good old-fashioned neutral side field matchup as Navy is going to find itself into the end zone. But in spite of that, Army has the lead. But that will change here with less than 2.5 minutes left in the first half, as Ron Mitchell is going to find his way into the end zone. Touchdown, Navy! And once again, Navy will have the lead. However, that lead is not going to be very much, it's going to be very short-lived because the Army is going to go on. They're going to get 11 unanswered points. So going into the final quarter, Navy is going to need to not only score here, but they will need a stop as well to have a chance. Well, they'll at least get the first one. Ron Mitchell does find the end zone there, but can they stop the Army, though? Army dropping back to pass on a 3rd and 5. They could have just ran out the clock. Oh, no, that is a terrible decision. In a game in which they have dominated the turnover battle, Navy all of a sudden has a little bit of life here. Less than 2 minutes left to play, though. Mitchell fires over the middle, and that's going to be completed for a gain of 10 yards, but that clock is still going to be running, and it gets down to about 30 seconds. Decent drive for Navy, but trying to put an exclamation point, and they do! Chris Morgan finds the end zone. Touchdown, Navy! And now all the pressure is on the Army Academy as well. 18 seconds left in this ball game. Is hold up now. Wait a minute. This could go to distance. And oh, he's going to be dropped inside the 10-yard line. Army might have 1 or possibly 2 plays, but much easier to punch it in from 6 yards out than 60 yards out. That missed tackle was huge, and that missed tackle ultimately is going to make the difference. Tom Gunn is going to fight his way through the end zone, and so a dramatic finish that does send Army on top, winning 31-28. But that was not the only top 25 game that we had planned here in this later season action. Ohio State is taking on the Wisconsin Badgers. Now, Ohio State has been pretty disappointing this year. Did not expect them to be 1-2 at this point in the year, but this is where they currently stand as of right now. And so it feels like it's a big moment for really both of these teams. Neither team really wants to be below 500 in order to like this late in the year. And a third loss by either team is going to put them out of the at-large discussion. So pressure is being felt on both teams right now, but Wisconsin seems like they're handling it better, as Wisconsin is going to find the end zone. Touchdown Badgers, and Mark Silva sets up a school record for most passing touchdowns in a career. That is a 66 career touchdown pass, the most for any Wisconsin quarterback ever. So it's been a fantastic year for the Wisconsin Badgers, as Smith is going to get another touchdown here, as John Andrews was even caught offside. So Ohio State defense low-key trying to cheat there, and it still didn't work. So Wisconsin will be awarded a touchdown. It's 21-0. Make that 28-0. And alarm bells just simply have to be ringing, because, listen, I know Ohio State's football team is not as good from a talent perspective than what they had last year, but with all that being considered, to be blown out like this against Wisconsin, I mean, this is just straight embarrassing. I don't know what to tell these guys, but 5.5 minutes left to play. There's still a little bit of life here for Ohio State, but not much. But a touchdown could go a long way from at least making this a more respectable game, as Austin Gross will find the end zone with less than 5 minutes left to play in the ball game. But with that said, that is not going to be enough, as the Wisconsin Badgers do beat Ohio State at home, 28-14 being your final score. We do get also a couple of studio updates from around the country, as UCLA beats Nevada 34-13. That means UCLA is going to be undefeated still. They have quietly gotten themselves to 5-0, and I mean, they really should be ranked in the top 25 at any moment now. In other news, speaking of top 25 teams, we got ourselves a shocker. South Carolina is going to stun Virginia Tech 52-33. This is the Hokies' second loss of the season, while South Carolina gets itself back to 500 as well. Meanwhile, in terms of other studio updates, Washington is going to take down the Stanford Cardinal 26-21. As such, Washington gets back to 500, while Stanford is still searching for their very first win of the season. And then rounding out your studio updates, we have one going final in the West Coast again. It's San Diego State beating Oregon State 45-14. Oregon State could not beat those pretender allegations, as they lose big at home, proving that they shouldn't have top 25 consideration in the first place. But now let's go ahead and check out some of the other notable games that might have happened here in week number 5. Georgia State, they went and played Georgia in Athens, and they almost took down the big brother. However, it did go into overtime, and ultimately the better team did end up winning. As for Miami, they get above 500 for what seems like the very first time this season, as they do beat the Hawaii Rainbow Warriors 35-28, but Hawaii did give them quite the fight that Miami is not soon gonna forget. As for LSU, they pulled the upset off against the Memphis Tigers 29-27, so it looks like LSU will probably take Memphis' place in the polls when those come out in a little bit. And the Ole Miss Rebels is going to hand Alabama their very first loss of the season. Alabama, to their credit, did start out 4-0, but they're not ready to compete with the big boys of college football just yet. So we will take yet another look at this top 25, and it seems like we do have so much more stability at the top right now. I mean, the top 12 to 15 teams. I mean, not really a lot of change. A lot of teams just kind of moving up one spot here or there. We start to see some changes down at 18 though. Now you saw in that studio update that they lost big to South Carolina. They're on bye this week so they can figure it out, but it turns out maybe Virginia Tech was a little bit overrated going into this season. They might be buckling under those expectations. Georgia did also move up a couple of spots. They will actually play against South Carolina next. Colorado State moves up a couple of spots. They beat up San Jose State. They're still undefeated as well. And we get a couple of newcomers. Like I said, Memphis essentially was replaced by LSU. LSU in a similar spot than what Memphis was in the last week. Coastal Carolina moves up a couple of spots. Navy's down 5. And then Arizona is back in the top 25. They are in at number 25 in the country. 35-0 win against the Appalachian State Mountaineers. So let's go ahead and jump into a couple more top 25 matchups, and we get a game in which, two teams that are actually kind of close to each other, Miami and LSU. However, they're in different conferences, so a key non-conference matchup, one of the last key non-conference matchups that we're likely going to get here in year number 6 before we get into that postseason action, obviously. So big game for both teams here, both at 3-2. It's kind of the same thing that we talked about with that Ohio State-Wisconsin game that we covered earlier in the season. It's that if whoever loses this game is likely going to be completely out of any at-large consideration. So again, big game for both of these teams right here. And Miami right now has that early 7-0 lead, and it helps that you have one of the best running backs in the entire country in Caleb Kirk, who you can constantly lean on. And I'm sure, this custom quarterback Trevor Veeden certainly doesn't mind either, as Trevor Veeden, speaking of which, the custom quarterback, does give Miami an early 14-0 lead. But with that said, LSU is going to storm back, and they will get 14 unanswered themselves. They're able to tie it before we go into this halftime locker room. So it just barrels down to who is going to win the second half. And so far, Trevor Veeden is going to work here in this second half. Going to be up 24-14, as now this young quarterback's rolling up to the right-hand side and finds Marquis Williams for a gain of 8 on the play. So now, second and short coming up here. Williams again drops back, faces some pressure, and the freshman quarterback was simply not ready for it. He was a backup that came in here, does have a lot of good potential, a lot of good things that he can do, but don't know if he's ready for this early stage here, as that was a nice back shoulder throw, in order to, get the receiver open, set up a 1st and goal. But on the very next throw, a freshman mistake that causes LSU points, and Miami is able to drive down the length of the field and maybe not score a touchdown, but they do get a field goal out of it. And most importantly, it kills time. It kills some important time on the clock there, as now Williams needs a big play, and he's going to get it here with Corey Poe. Corey Poe is going to score for the LSU Tigers, but with that being said, that is not enough, as Miami recovers the onside kick, and they'll beat LSU in Death Valley. But we also have the Red River Rivalry coming in our direction shortly, as both Big 12 squads are currently undefeated on the season. Texas obviously getting a little bit more respect with what they've done over the last few years, while Oklahoma, we actually have not seen Oklahoma in the college football playoff. Surprisingly, Oklahoma, one of those top programs coming into the NCSL prior to getting set up. So it is certainly very surprising, to say the least. But Oklahoma can really cement those chances and be taken seriously if they can not just win, but even if they can just keep it close, right? Because even with the undefeated records, Texas is seen consensually as one of the best teams in college football. They have a lot more talent on that roster than Oklahoma appears to have, but hey, Oklahoma, give them all the credit in the world. They are hanging tough with the Texas Longhorns in what's been a surprisingly raining day out here in Dallas, Texas, in the Cotton Bowl Stadium. As now, 3rd and 3, looking to throw a back shoulder fade, and it works to perfection as Mark Kelly's going to catch that one into the end zone. Touchdown, Longhorns. And so the Longhorns will take a 14-7 lead into the half. But trying to build upon that lead, it's going to be a different story, though. Going to be intercepted. This could go all the way. And ain't nobody going to be catching this man either. Touchdown, Oklahoma. And we got a tie ball game again on our hands. So just about a quarter and a half left to play here in the ball game as Texas is getting ready to be back in the red zone once again. They're going to be working to try and exercising some demons there, as we now have a 1st and goal after the short completion, trying to set up the read option, and that is gonna be Justin Clark that's gonna find the end zone. Touchdown for the Longhorns, as now it's gonna be a 21-14 lead for Texas, and trying to put this particular game away for good, as a touchdown on this drive is going to make this 2-touchdown hole hard to overcome. Looking over the middle, but it's going to be intercepted yet again, and it's the freshman linebacker, Ron Baker, out of Hugo, Oklahoma, that is able to come out and make a great play on the ball. But Oklahoma not only could not find a way to score, but Oklahoma also is the team that really be giving up the safety. So, and that was huge because instead of it being a 7-point game, it's now a 9-point game. And then offense just sputtered out for Oklahoma in the regard. And now Texas is on the verge of closing this Red River rivalry out once again. 3rd and goal. Clark has some time over the middle of the field, and it's going to find Austin Tyler in the end zone. Touchdown, Texas. And they'll even go for the 2-point conversion, which they do also get as well. So effectively, this game is over. But Oklahoma's still showing some fight. They're certainly not going to give up by any means. 1 minute left in the ball game as Oklahoma tries to dive into the end zone here, trying to make that scoreboard look a little bit prettier, and they at least accomplish that particular task. But it won't be enough, though, as Texas will once again be your winners of the Red River rivalry. Meanwhile, we get a studio update real fast as Texas A&M also handled its business. They took on SMU. Won a close one, though. The Mustangs almost pull off an upset, but there will be no cigar here. But now let's go ahead and take the time to look at some other notable Week 6 games that did happen on our watch. Part of that Commander-in-Chief's Trophy Series has Navy playing Air Force, and Air Force could not get anything going offensively. They were completely crushed by Navy, and so the Naval Academy could at least get a share of the Commanders-in-Chief's trophy if Air Force can bounce back and beat Army later this season. As for the Ole Miss Rebels, they've recently taken their first loss of the season to the Memphis Tigers, but they'll bounce back here, now on a 2-game winning streak, courtesy of a 45-38 win over Southern Alabama. As for the Nittany Lions of Penn State, they will actually still remain undefeated on the season. They'll do so by beating Rutgers 35-24 in order to open up Conference USA action. Your defending national champions are now at least bowl eligible as they take on fellow conference opponent Nevada, and they win 52-28 in impressive fashion. The Colorado State Rams will also remain undefeated on the season as well as they beat Wyoming in a shootout 45-39. Florida is going to barely survive against Tennessee, a key rivalry game that ends up going to overtime, but the Gators will survive and jump out to a 5-1 start on the season. But the biggest surprise of week number 6 is that South Carolina pulls it off against another top 25 opponent. Last week it was Virginia Tech, and now it's Georgia getting its turn. South Carolina wins 28-23 as they get off to quite the best start that South Carolina has had in quite some time. And finally, Nebraska is going to have an early chokehold on the American Conference as they take down Minnesota 49-20. Nebraska making a case for being ranked number 1 in the country. But we are already closing in on the halfway point of the season already, and we're starting to see, a clear top starting to form. I mean, your top 5 is going to be pretty much the same here: USC, Nebraska, Texas, and Michigan. Oregon, however, is going to surge here a little bit. They move up a couple of spots to number 5 in the country. Could be a legitimate challenger to USC in the Pac-12. You also got Penn State, who moved up 4 spots as well. Iowa went down 2, even though they did win convincingly against against Kansas, I should say. So real surprise there. Speaking of Kansas, they now have the pleasure of taking on Missouri, who happens to be number 11 in the country right now. Pittsburgh, they were on bye this last week. They moved down a couple of spots as well. You do also have, a little bit of small movements here or there, but Colorado State here towards the bottom, they continue to creep up here a little bit. They're up 2 spots to number 19. They play Air Force up next. Oklahoma's down 4, Navy is up 3, and then we got a few newcomers once again. UCLA finally in at number 22. It's their first appearance of the season. Memphis is back in after they beat Kentucky. And then Florida State is back in the top 25 as well. They are in at number 25 in the country, but they have a major test against the Miami Hurricanes. So just about reaching that halfway point in the season, and we have been blessed with a national championship rematch between USC and San Diego State. These two teams did meet twice last season, not only for that national championship, but also in the regular season as well. And of course, as you know, USC would end up winning both of those games en route to winning that national championship in year number 6. So let's see if San Diego State can finally get over the hump and beat USC, because San Diego State's been a really good team the last couple of years. They really have been, and it looks like it's going to be shaping up to be another really good season for the Aztecs yet again. But can they get over that final hump? Can they take down this USC team once and for all? 3rd and short coming up as the Aztecs are going to run it up the gut, and Tim Stallings is going to find the end zone. Touchdown, San Diego State. And the Aztecs are putting that number 1 team in college football officially on notice, and they'll do it with this interception as well. Picked off in the red zone, so the defense is even coming through and making some big plays as well. You absolutely love to see it. However, the Aztecs could not do anything with it, and USC is able to march its way right back into the red zone. We'll see if they can have a better result this time around. 2nd and goal coming up after a little 5-yard false start penalty. Spence is going to drop back. He's going to throw to the left-hand side, and it's a dangerous throw that ends up being intercepted yet again. But the Aztecs secondary, it seems like they certainly have their number. So the Aztecs will carry a lead into halftime, but we knew that San Diego State, they can hang with USC and even take leads on this team, like 2, even 3 quarters into it. But can they play a complete 4-quarter game? Well, that's a little bit more questionable, because USC does take the lead late in the 3rd quarter. And then again, the USC Trojans, with less than 6 minutes left in the ball game, they have yet another red zone possession coming right up, and they have a chance to take the lead for the first time in a minute. Spence is going to get to the outside. He's going to run it into the end zone for a touchdown, and USC just simply never looked back after that. The Trojans win a close one, 24-17. They got a free game winning streak against the Aztecs. Now, besides the rematch of the national championship game, there was other notable top 25 teams that were in action in the early going. Colorado State is one of those teams, and they once again proved that they might be underrated. They blow out Air Force, who's having a decent season actually, but they blew them out by 30 plus though. As for the Clemson Tigers, we didn't spend a lot of time talking about them so far this season, but they're a top 10 team quietly. They win 49-27 against North Carolina, who's having a down year. They're still searching their first win of the season. As for Ole Miss, they continue its run for the Sun Belt as they beat Auburn 28-16 to be bowl eligible. The Pittsburgh Panthers are also able to win in a more defensive style game as they beat up on Rutgers 28-3. The Panthers now just one game away from being bowl eligible themselves. And the Florida Gators will officially be bowl eligible after a close 35-33 win over the LSU Tigers, who suffer now their fourth loss of the season. Meanwhile, the Wisconsin Badgers look to avoid an 0-3 start in American Conference play, but it seems pretty clear that Wisconsin, at least early on in the season, has had one of the most difficult schedules in college football. This is already, I believe, their third-ranked opponent that Wisconsin has had to play this season. And this time, it's going to be the Iowa Hawkeyes that they will go up against. But not just any Iowa team. A top 10 Iowa team that they got to go to Kinnick Stadium and go up against. It's not going to be an easy task at all for Wisconsin. Let's see if this Badgers team is built different, as they're going to go for it here on 4th and goal, trying to show the cojones. And Daryl Miller will find the end zone. Touchdown, Badgers! So Wisconsin will take the early lead, but in the start of the second quarter, Iowa will look to respond themselves as Drew Robinson is going to take a hit from a couple of defenders, but he's still going to keep it rolling here. They're going to make it a 2nd and 5, makes it much more manageable, before Drew Robinson again is going to scramble and find his way into the end zone, running through a defender in the process, as that will take us into halftime. But after this first half, Iowa starts to pull away, and Wisconsin desperate need of a spark, and they're certainly going to get one from Mark Silva, who has been very good for the Wisconsin Badgers. It is not his fault that his team is, they've already lost a couple of games. Mark Silva, quietly one of the better quarterbacks in the American Conference, and that's on display here, getting a tightrope throw to CJ Jones for a 14-yard gain. And now Wisconsin has the lead with less than a minute left. But can their defense hold? No, it cannot. Deion Wilson gets wide but naked open over the middle of the field. Just a big breakdown on defense. And so Wisconsin, they need a field goal here. They do drive into field goal range. We'll see if they can kick this little 35-yard field goal, and it's good. So we will have a tied game, 27-all here. And it looks like 4 quarters of football is not going to be enough to settle this. So, with that said, we are now going to take ourselves into overtime to take on the question, who will come out on top here in Kinnick Stadium? We'll go ahead and get started with the first overtime period, as Wisconsin actually did have to settle for a field goal, does make the field goal attempt. And we do also get blessed with a studio update as well, with things running a little late. Texas A&M is able to beat Oklahoma State 30-24. That should help Texas A&M's bid to try and sneak into this top 10 as we reach this halfway point in the season. So Iowa, if they can get a touchdown on this drive, though, they will be your winners here at Kinnick Stadium, and the Hawkeyes will be having that 5-1 start. It leads down to a goal line situation and barrels down to a couple of plays, and Justin Wright is going to score. Touchdown, Hawkeyes, and it's over here. Iowa will win, and they're going to be 5-1 on the year. Meanwhile, we have a battle between two teams that just absolutely hate each other. Florida State and Miami getting ready to go at it up next, as the number 25 ranked Florida State Seminoles looking to prove that they should stay in the top 25, while also trying to prove that they can beat this Miami team as well. Miami has had Florida State's number as of recent, but they are certainly trying to change that here in season number 6, as we do cut into about midway through the second quarter, and a good run by Travis Beast to the outside. He knew he had that leverage, and so the Seminoles have a 10-point lead that they ultimately carry into the halftime locker room. However, Miami got the ball to start the second half, and they, of course, are going to ride their top tailback, Caleb Kirk, who's going to run it into the end zone by himself. One of the more impressive red zone runs, and it helps the Hurricanes pull within 3. But can they get this stop on defense, though? I mean, offensively, Miami is playing fine. Defensively, not so much, as the Seminoles are already 2 for 2 on 4th down conversions. You would think the third time is a charm, but not here, though. Terrence Garcia finds the end zone. A touchdown for the Seminoles. And matter of fact, Florida State is actually starting to pull away, and this is big, because if Florida State can hang on, then they're going to control their own destiny to get to the SEC championship, something that Florida State has not done yet. I don't think in this series, actually. You would think Florida State will have had a SEC title by now in this series, but that just hasn't happened yet. And yet, here they are with less than 6 minutes left. If they can hang on and win this, they'll control their own fate in the SEC, and it'll be Miami. They'll actually need some additional help, and sure enough, Florida State does hang on and win, so this could have huge implications in the SEC moving forward. That being said, before we check out some other notable games and maybe some conference standings, let's take a quick look around the country real quick from these studio updates. Hawaii beat Stanford 35-14, and so Hawaii will try to salvage their season. They try to get back to 500. And then South Carolina beats Arkansas 33-28. The Gamecocks silently having a pretty good season. And then to close things out in week number 7, the Arizona Wildcats continue to prove why they are also a top 25 team like Colorado State. They do so by beating a good Boise State squad 38-21. And then in another case of the Border War Showdown series, Missouri is able to handle its rivals down up north, taking on those Kansas Jayhawks. They win 38-17, as Missouri is still undefeated and is officially bowl eligible. So we're actually just made it through about halfway through the season here in year number 6. So let's take a quick look at how things are shaping up in the conference standings perspective. Now, starting with the Carolinas division in the ACC, Clemson and Wake Forest are both tied for first place right now. However, all of these other teams are still in it. It's going to make for a very interesting second half in the ACC. And this also kind of holds true over in the Commonwealth division. Granted, it turns into a little bit more of a 2-team race. Duke is currently on top once again. They have a 4-2 overall record, but the only other team that's really in a position to challenge right now is NC State. All of these other teams have work to do. Meanwhile, in the Frontier division of the American, it's turning into a 2-team race. Missouri, who is undefeated and ranked number 7 in the country, they are tied for first place with Nebraska, who is also a top 5 team in their own right. No one else is really in a position to challenge either. Likely will be a 2-team race, and these 2 teams will play each other later this year. Meanwhile, in the Lake Division, if someone other than Iowa comes out of the Lake Division, I'll be very shocked. They're already 4-0 in conference play, and Iowa is poised to make their first playoff appearance in the NCSL series. That being said, we now go over to the Alamo division, and again, not a lot of surprises here. Texas is on top. However, they do gotta play against Texas A&M, who's having an amazing season so far, ranked number 13 in the country. Maybe they would lose to Texas the majority of the time, but it only takes one. Also, keep an eye out for the Rice Owls, who haven't played either team yet. On the other side, it's a much more open race overall. It's got a 2-way tie for first between North Texas and SMU. However, all of these other teams, and notably Oklahoma, they're all still in this thing, and they're all putting together good seasons. Could be one of the better divisions in college football. In the Big Ten, we go to the Buckeye Division next, and right now, a little bit of surprise as the Cincinnati Bearcats get off to a 6-0 start to the season. Ohio State having a little bit of a down year, so maybe we could see someone else in this conference championship game. Also, Ohio and the Kent State Golden Flashes, even though they started the year 1-4, they're not too far away. As for the Hoosier division on the other side, it's a two-way tie at the moment between Michigan and Michigan State, who's trying to prove that they deserve to be ranked in that top 25. Purdue and Ball State are not too far behind themselves, and Ball State in particular is having an excellent season so far. Now, on to the Colonial Division of the Conference USA, and quite a surprise here actually, Temple is alone at top. They're only 2-4, but those 2 wins both come in conference play, and that does put them in first place ahead of Maryland as well as Texas State, who I believe both are better teams than this Temple squad. In the Union, no, there's a lot more teams in the picture, as there's a three-way tie for first between Penn State, the Pittsburgh Panthers, and Army. Syracuse also not too far behind. They still got to play those top 3 teams as well, though. That being said, out in the Blues division, as we got two-way tie for first, as Western Kentucky, who's having an excellent season, is here at 5-1. Louisville, your defending MAC champions, are still hanging around though. They're 4-2 overall, with Mid-Tennessee State also not too far behind. Meanwhile, we got 2 undefeated teams from the Great Lakes division of the MAC, and that is the Thundering Herd of Marshall, who has gone bowl eligible, and you also have Northern Illinois as well, who made that college football playoff back in year number 4. As for the Desert division of the Mountain West, right now got 2 undefeated teams, both in the state of Arizona. That's Arizona, who's ranked number 21, and then Arizona State. So that territorial cup at the end of the season might be something to watch out for. Colorado also is very much in this thing as well. They have a 2-1 record. Plus, they have to play Arizona and Arizona State as well. But in the Mountain, all eyes are on Colorado State, as they still remain undefeated this season, but they haven't locked anything yet up as of yet. They still have Wyoming and Boise State on their tails. They do have to play at least one of these 2 teams. Plus, Utah State actually isn't terrible. They're actually a bearable team this year. And because of that, Utah State is right in the thick of things as well. Now, as for the Pac-12, the Pac-12 is overall a pretty open place, but there's 3 teams to watch out for. Oregon, who is absolutely the front runner, but they still have that Civil War game against Oregon State, who is one of the better unranked teams in college football. Plus the Washington Huskies, who are always in the thick of things as well. They are a team that's underachieving a little bit, but could make a surge in the second half. And then, of course, in the Pacific Division, you got 2 teams tied between UCLA and USC. So that Battle of LA is going to be electric. San Diego State will need a little bit of help, but they could have a legitimate shot at an at-large bid once again. The Hawaii Rainbow Warriors, however, might be out of the playoff considerations, but they can certainly play spoiler, and they play both UCLA and USC later this season. On to the Peach Division, and right now only 1 team has less than 1 loss, and it's surprisingly Coastal Carolina. Granted, they have to play the rest of their conference schedule, but they do have that signature win against Georgia at the beginning of the season. Over in the Sunshine, though, right now Florida State is in control for the time being, but they do have to play UCF, and then they also got to play this Florida team as well late in the season, so could see a little bit of a mix-up in the SEC once again. Finally, for the Sun Belt, you have a 2-team race for the time being, as Arkansas is on top with a 5-1 conference record. LSU has struggled for the non-conference play, but because they're 3-1 in the actual Sun Belt, they still have their playoff hopes all alive, but they will not be able to get in as an at-large, so very little room for error at this point. Memphis, Louisiana, and Arkansas State could also make things interesting as well, as they both only have one more loss than the teams above. And finally, you got the Dixie Division, and it's a 3-team race here, it seems like. Mississippi State is actually still undefeated. They're 4-0 in conference play. They will have to find a way to take down Ole Miss, and they'll also have to do the same for Alabama. Alabama does not have the tiebreaker on Ole Miss as well, but effectively a 3-team race here as we move now onto the second half of the regular season. So let's now go ahead and jump into the second half of the regular season, and it starts with this showdown in the Keystone Challenge, as Penn State will be taking on the Pittsburgh Panthers. Penn State coming in undefeated, while the Pittsburgh Panthers come in ranked number 12 in the country, but they do have that loss in non-conference play against USC. Winner of this game will really control their fate in terms of getting to that Conference USA Championship at the beginning of the season. And it's a pretty close game between these two teams, but Pittsburgh will eventually take the lead against the Nittany Lions there, as they'll be able to take that 17-7 lead. However, late in the first half, Penn State has a chance to try to pull within a possession, but Daniel Williams just made it a lot more difficult on himself. He ends up getting sacked in the backfield there, and on a 3rd and goal, this is a long 3rd and goal, trying to make something happen, but Terry Rosario somehow does. Touchdown, Nittany Lions. And Penn State is only down by a few points, but Pittsburgh will not fall to this Penn State team, at least not very easily. Pittsburgh is going to score there to start the second half. And then later on in the 3rd quarter as well, the Panthers put together yet another drive that would result in a red zone opportunity. And this is one of the more difficult things about playing Pittsburgh. They're one of the fastest teams in America, and that's going to continue to be shown here as Pittsburgh does score yet again. And they're going to be up 31-14 with 5.5 left to play. Looking over to the left-hand side and finds the end zone. Touchdown, Nittany Lions. And now looking at just a 10-point differential, as now going to run it inside for the tailback. We're going to run it into the end zone. Touchdown, Panthers. Cedric Anthony is going to seal the deal as Pitt hands Penn State their first loss of the year. But while we did have that Keystone Pipeline rivalry game going down, we also had a bunch of other top 25 related matchups happen elsewhere. Virginia Tech was actually given a battle against North Carolina as the Tar Heels desperately search for that first win, but they are just going to come up just short after North Carolina pulled to within a touchdown with a minute left. That being said, the Tar Heels still search for their first win of the year. But Texas also got a battle on its hands against UTSA, and the Roadrunners gave it everything that they had, but the Texas Longhorns were also able to eventually prevail. However, they actually needed that third overtime to get it done. The Longhorns are still undefeated. As for Michigan State, they came in 5-1, but were not ranked, but Ohio State, who was under 500, was. That's going to change here now, or at least I hope so, as Michigan State beats Ohio State 36-33. Hopefully this earns a top 25 spot for the Spartans. As for the Oklahoma Sooners, they handle their business against the Kansas Jayhawks, and they will win their game 41-24. Kansas now falls to 2-5, while Oklahoma looks to climb the top 15. Miami is going to match up with Georgia Tech, though, and this was a rematch from the SEC Championship last year. Miami will ultimately get their revenge 31-29. It's safe to say the Yellow Jackets, they might not be returning back to the playoff. And of course, the Michigan Wolverines are going to remain undefeated for now as they beat Purdue 31-19, as Michigan is looking for a team ahead of them to slip up so that they can advance further up the rankings. But towards the back end of week number 8, you got number 7 Missouri making the road trip up to Madison, Wisconsin to take on this number 24 ranked Wisconsin team. And again, another top 25 team that Wisconsin has to come up against. And it seems pretty clear, even though we're just in week number 8. We talk about teams that, feel like could go the distance. And then there's other teams that maybe start off strong, but the weight of the season eventually wears them down. Maybe Wisconsin, in hindsight, is one of these teams, because you would think they would play better than this with a top 20, not only top 25 team, but a top 10 team in their building. And that just hasn't happened here. Wisconsin is down big, but with 3 minutes left in the first half, Charles Morgan at least gets a 2-point conversion. And maybe Wisconsin is also trying to make me eat my words here, because Wisconsin is going to claw back into this game. And now they're only down by 2. So if they can get a stop here on defense, get a turnover, the momentum would clearly be shifting towards Wisconsin's way. But that also would require you to recover all of your receivers. And Bo Robinson, that's his third touchdown pass. That's probably the easiest one that he is going to have today. But hang on now. Wisconsin covers a fumble there to try to make it interesting. However, that slow start was just impossible to overcome, as Missouri Tigers do win 41-29. So, some studio updates before we jump into week 9 real quick. You got Hawaii beating Oregon State 42-35. Ducks have lost the Beavers have lost 2 of their last 3 games. And then Oregon has beat Fresno State 44-28. So the Bulldogs are on a 4-game losing streak, while Oregon still remains undefeated for the time being. But now we move into week number 9 as we start to see a clear top tier in the NCSL. 7 undefeated teams remaining, at least in this top 7. Got a couple of key muscle movements though. Missouri, after their impressive win against Wisconsin on the road, will they move into the top 5? And then UCLA gets a lot more respect. They're now ranked number 7 in the country, even though they were on bye last week. That's even a bigger move up than when Pittsburgh, who actually hosted Penn State in the Keystone Pipeline game, that Pittsburgh team moves up to number 10 in the country, up a couple of spots. That being said, a couple of more things happening, including Penn State moving down 7 spots because of that Keystone Pipeline game. Colorado State does move up a couple of spots while on bye as well. And then towards the bottom here, we do have a few newcomers. The Cincinnati Bearcats, for the first time in this series, gets ranked in the top 25. Cincinnati comes in ranked number 23, and they are starting their season 7-0. They're joined by South Carolina, who was on bye. South Carolina being ranked for the first time in this series as well. And then Georgia does sneak back in at number 25, but they do have a test against Florida coming up in the world's biggest cocktail party. So let's call it a Trey Songz song and jump right into week number 9. In week number 9, we get some key games happening all around the country. Clemson is looking to chase that elusive ACC title, and they're certainly on a mission this season. Getting tested against North Carolina State, but pulling one out 42-37 to be bowl eligible. Speaking of that bowl eligibility, South Carolina is now just 1 win away after a 40-17 win over North Carolina. The Tar Heels, meanwhile, will they go winless this year? That's the $1 million question. They're now sitting at 0-7 because of that. As for the Arizona Wildcats, they are going to hang on for dear life and beat Utah 25-24 thanks to 12 unanswered points in that 4th and final quarter. This does get Arizona bowl eligibility, but they're searching for more. As for the Missouri Tigers, they will continue to remain undefeated. They beat Minnesota here 31-21, now putting the Tigers at 8-0 on the season. And of course, we do check in on the number 1 team in the nation, USC, and the Trojans do what they're supposed to do. They handle business against Hawaii here, winning 34-20. But one of the biggest games that we have here in week number 9 just so happens to be the world's biggest cocktail party between the Georgia Bulldogs and the Florida Gators. Georgia just got themselves back into the top 25 recently. Georgia, not the same Georgia team since Jake Jacobs did end up leaving in order to become the head coach of the Air Force Falcons. But they're still, ranked. So they still, they have a little bit of a heartbeat, so to speak, in terms of their playoff chances. Beating Florida, though, would come a long way. And it's certainly not impossible, given that this is not a typical home game for Florida. This is more of a neutral site game. And for Georgia and Florida, both of these teams do have, pretty similar crowds. So it's a pretty even 50-50 split, even though this game is taking place in the state of Florida. But getting into the last minute of the first half, Georgia does have a nice lead, up 14-3. But Georgia's going to get to the line of scrimmage quickly, looking to score. We're throwing over the middle and finds Robert London in the end zone. Touchdown for Georgia. And the Georgia Bulldogs were just in full control there in that first half, and that might continue here as well, as Tim Green is gonna moss a defender in the corner of the end zone. Oh baby, he did not have to do him dirty like that, but yes he did. Yes, he absolutely did. Georgia in full control here in the cocktail party, as the Gators are just trying to find some set of consistent offense. And they'll finally find some here with 7 minutes left, as Brandon McGrew is going to find the end zone for the Gators. I imagine that they will also try and go for the 2-point conversion as well. And yes, they do. Calling a little bit of a spacing concept. Tries to throw it in the back of the end zone, no. And that does get intercepted. So the 2-point conversion ends up failing. So that means if the Gators do score a couple of touchdowns, even then, they're going to need to go for 2-point conversions from here on out. The extra point, I would say, is officially out of play. So let's see if Florida can do precisely that. First and goal, looking around, facing some pressure though, throws it right inside, and it's intercepted yet again. Going to take the knee in the end zone to bring him back out to the 20. But the Georgia defense holding up pretty well here, as it looks like Georgia's going to win your cocktail party. But not before Florida gets a little bit of a last lap, getting a little bit of garbage time scoring. But Georgia is still going to win, so that they can stay in the top 25 for right now. We do have one other top 25 game happening later on, and it's UCLA making the trip down to San Diego to take on the San Diego State Aztecs. UCLA undefeated and actually getting a lot more respect over the last couple of weeks, as they're a number 7 ranked team in the nation. They were just unranked a few weeks ago. So UCLA finally having some respect put on its name. They can have even more respect on its name if they can beat this Aztecs team, which San Diego State, don't get me wrong, they absolutely need this win too. So expect a maximum effort for both teams, obviously, as now we're going to go ahead and see the quarterback for the Aztecs trying to run it up the gut. Still remains on the feet. He refuses to go down. The FCS transfer eventually gets called down just short of the first down marker. And so Aztecs will go for it here. Brandon Young sliding to his right, but throws across the field to find an open Chad Simmons. Touchdown Aztecs. And that will officially tie this ball game up. 5 minutes left in the first half though, as UCLA looks to respond. Hollis throws to the left-hand side and finds quarterback Kenji Kobayashi, who does get a little bit shaken up there. He's going to be the future of the UCLA Bruins. He should be the new starting quarterback once Brandon Hollis does end up graduating. But that will be a next year problem though. For now, UCLA is just ultimately worried about winning this game, as Brandon Hollis is going to make a rare mistake there, throwing it to the outlet, but the outlet was certainly not open at all. So with less than a minute left, San Diego State has a chance to take the lead, and they will. Joe White will find the end zone. Touchdown Aztecs. So San Diego State is now up 17-14 as it puts the pressure on Brandon Hollis, who gets hit as he throws this ball, but it's a beautifully thrown football to William Jones, who takes the top off the defense. So UCLA will score quickly and in more impressive fashion. The Bruins will now have a 4-point lead again. So less than 30 seconds left to halftime. We'll see how the Aztecs want to play this out. And originally it seems like the Aztecs, well, they wanted to maybe take it in the halftime, but with that first down, they're going to choose to be a little bit more aggressive here. But Brandon Young just could not get enough air on that ball. And so UCLA will get a turnover towards the end of the first half. And we will have a close one for sure. But one that will allow UCLA to have this 4-point lead. So we did end up seeing a lot of scoring in that first half. However, second half was a little bit different. It became a little bit more of a defensive battle as, hang on now, UCLA is going to recover a fumble. I thought it would be considered like an incompletion because I didn't feel like he really made the completed the process of the catch, I guess. But evidently the officials disagreed, and yeah, I mean, San Diego State, they had their fair share of opportunities to take the lead earlier, but turnovers really costed them. So even with all of that, 2 minutes left to play here in the ball game, Aztecs still have a chance to win, but they got to take better care of the football though. Young's going to drop back. He's going to face some pressure up the middle, but finds an open Joe Wine in the end zone. Touchdown, Aztecs. And so San Diego State has the lead. But can UCLA change all of that? Hollis facing pressure, fires. It's intercepted. Picked off at about midfield, and Brandon Hollis walks off the field in disbelief. And San Diego State will hold on and hand UCLA their very first loss of year number 6. So, some studio updates to keep an eye on for sure, as well as Washington does beat California 45-21. The Huskies silently having a good year of themselves after their slow start. So let's go ahead and round out some of those notable Week 9 games real quick before we get a little bit of a poll update. Oklahoma, they put up a 50-burger on Texas Tech, a solid Texas Tech team, winning by 40 plus, and so Oklahoma does become bowl eligible with this win. In addition, the Nittany Lions of Penn State are also able to dominate their matchup against the Temple Owls as Penn State bounces back from a Keystone Pipeline loss. Penn State trying to remain alive in the Conference USA race. And the Miami Hurricanes are back to their winning ways. They now win yet another matchup, this time against UCF, winning 38-28 in that one. Alright, so coming into week number 10, this is what we are currently working through. The top 6 remaining pretty much the same with a few changes here. But do want to give a shout out to a couple of teams that did move up multiple spots though. I was able to move up to number 7 after a big win against Northwestern. Pittsburgh avoids the upset against Boston College, and they move up 2 spots. Clemson won their game. Ole Miss beat Eastern Michigan, but not the most convincing way. And then, of course, we saw Penn State rebound. UCLA does drop a few spots down to number 12. That's 5 spots down, even though they played a very good San Diego State team. And speaking of that San Diego State team, they're ranked right behind them. Army is up a couple spots as well. They beat Syracuse. Florida's down 7 after their loss to Georgia. And then you got Oklahoma up 2. Cincinnati is up 5. They continue to climb the rankings, starting to get a little bit more respect from the nation. Arizona's up 1. And then rounding out your group, Georgia's up a few spots to number 22. South Carolina is up 1. And then 2 newcomers in Mississippi State and Florida State as well. 2 teams from that southeastern part of the country. So week number 10 actually did not have any top 25 matchups to dive into, but there was still some interesting games around the country that week. We got a conclusion to the Commanders and Chiefs series here as Army is able to dismantle Air Force 58-10, so Army will be your champions of the Commanders and Chiefs trophy. As for Virginia Tech, they continue its roll through the ACC as they beat up Boston College 49-35 in a surprising shootout. This makes the Hokies bowl eligible, while Boston College must win out for the same thing. Now, another surprise that we have been witnessing is that Michigan State was not ranked, even though they were at 6-1. They had an opportunity to prove those naysayers wrong, but that will not be happening here as Michigan is able to dismantle the Spartans 45-21. Maybe those naysayers were right after all. As for the Texas Longhorns, they continue to remain undefeated as they easily handle Texas A&M by 30+. Texas A&M, after that strong start, now on a 2-game losing streak all of a sudden. Meanwhile, the UCLA Bruins continue to take advantage of their fellow conference opponents as they beat up Stanford 44-14. The Stanford Cardinal having a woeful season, now sitting at just 1-9 right now. Absolutely disgusting stuff. However, the crosstown rivals are on that nasty business, doing Fresno State dirty, 56-24 being your final score. Ever since the Bulldogs went on that 2-0 start to get ranked, they have just not been the same since then, now on a 6-game losing streak. But we do have a massive upset happening in the Conference USA as Syracuse is able to beat Penn State 31-23, which means Pittsburgh might be one of the representatives in that Conference USA championship all of a sudden. That being said, the Missouri Tigers also are remaining undefeated. They're now 9-0 after a 35-28 victory over a decent Iowa State squad. And that was all of the notable games in week number 10. But with that being said, here's what the polls are now looking like as of right now. UCLA does move up 4 spots. They had that impressive win over Stanford. Cincinnati is on bye, but because of the fact that they are on a undefeated streak right now, they get a much more respect, because people are finding out about Cincinnati more. They're up 9 spots because of that, which is crazy to see. Army moves up 4. Florida moves up 4, even though they were on bye this week. Big one here is Oregon. Oregon did suffer their first loss of the season. They did lose to Nevada 21-38. The Oregon Ducks now are coming out as a 7-1 team. They lost to Nevada. Virginia Tech moves up a few spots. Oklahoma moves up 3 spots after they beat North Texas. Arizona continue to play extremely well in the Mountain West. They're now 7-1 themselves. Clemson does lose to Charlotte, so that's a big blow to their ACC chances. Really going to come down to that Virginia Tech game once again as they barely lose that game. Miami moves up 3. Memphis moves up 3 after they beat Southern Miss. Georgia up 3 as well. They're up to number 19 in the country. Then rounding out your group, you got Washington, who did pull the upset off against San Diego State, so you do love to see that. And then you got Mississippi State at 22, Florida State at 23, Ole Miss down to number 24. They were shocked by Troy, and they almost fall out of the top 25 completely. And then, of course, you see Coastal Carolina. They are back in at number 25 in the country. They were ranked earlier this season. Alright, so let's go ahead and dive right into week number 11 now as we start with the Miami Hurricanes. They went and take on Florida Atlantic and win on that road game 42-14. So FAU's season is now effectively over as they cannot be bowl eligible even if they win out. As for the Bedlam series, we do have a big win for Oklahoma in Bedlam. Oklahoma wins this one 49-24 against the Cowboys as Oklahoma tries to climb to that top 10. But we do have another big upset happen on the peripherals as Oregon is actually going to fall to Cal. Cal is going to get a big time win here, beating Oregon 29-24, and it's going to create some chaos in that Pac-12 Northwestern Division race. As for the Florida Gators, they are going to be able to bounce back after their disappointment in the world's biggest cocktail party. The Gators win 31-21, humbling them South Carolina Gamecocks. And then Florida State is trying to climb back into that at-large positioning. They help themselves a little bit by beating UCF by 19, but it seems clear the Seminoles will need a little bit of help. So let's go ahead and check back in on the Conference USA real fast, as we're about to get into a battle of undefeateds. Pittsburgh is going to make the trip to West Point to take on the number 10 ranked Army, and Pittsburgh is going to find the end zone here early. Pittsburgh gets that 7-0 lead early on, but beyond that, it becomes a little bit of a slugfight, or at least more of a slugfight than maybe what you would originally expect, considering that you do see both Army and Pittsburgh scoring on their opening drives. But after their opening drives, points were much more difficult to come by, as Pittsburgh wants to try to run it in with the triple option. They will with Cedric Andrews, so it's a 17-7 game. Doesn't sound too bad. However, the Army is looking to take the lead before going into halftime, trying to throw over to the left-hand side, and it is caught for a first down by Michael Walters. Is now, a couple of plays later, facing a 3rd and long, trying to drop back the pass, throws to the right-hand side, but it's going to be intercepted at the very last second, and that was the big difference in this first half. You know, Army just not taking care of the football at all, having 3 turnovers in the first half, while Pittsburgh did end up playing a much cleaner game, and their tailback put together a heroic effort, Cedric Andrews, but in the end zone again for Pittsburgh. As now the Black Knights are down by 12, and they need a score, which they will get early in the 4th quarter, as Tom Gunn finally throws a touchdown pass, and not throwing to the people in the white jerseys. However, it's another too little too late, as Army suffers their first loss in conference play. After that, we check in on some of the other late night Week 11 games of note, as Georgia is trying to surge here in these closing weeks of the regular season. This game against Auburn could help a little bit. A 41-28 victory. It also knocks Auburn out of bowl contention. As for the Washington Huskies, they were taking on a Penn State team that was ranked in the top 25 before they lost to Syracuse. And the Nittany Lions are now on a 2-game losing streak, losing a close one at home to this ranked Husky squad. I'm also proud to report that Stanford's season is almost finally over. I'm sure Stanford is happy to get into this offseason. They lose yet another one, this time to USC, 42-17. Their overall record now drops to 1-10. But we should have a newcomer into the top 25, though, as Mississippi State suffers their first loss in conference play is to that Alabama Crimson Tide squad. Alabama wins 35-14, and that does mean that Crimson Tide team could be seeing itself ranked in the top 25 very soon. So it's safe to say that Mississippi State fell out of that top 25, but who is going to take their place? First, here's a quick look at what the top's looking like right now. We got Pittsburgh, who does have that 5-point win over Army, and Cincinnati up 3 spots to number 6 in the country. They had a dominant win over Toledo. Meanwhile, some other movements in the top 10 include Florida moving up because of the South Carolina win, Oklahoma won Bedlam, and then Arizona won in a shootout against Colorado. Wildcats also putting together an impressive campaign in their own right. In other news, Clemson moves up 5 spots after a dominant win over Appalachian State. Miami is up to 12. Iowa suffers a surprising loss to Bowling Green. They dropped their 2nd game of the season, and this could add a little bit of a wrinkle to that American Conference Championship race after all. You do got Memphis that moves up a few spots to 14. Texas actually loses a game. They drop a game against UTEP. Now that is a surpriser for sure. Shout out to UTEP for pulling off that big time upset. Washington, they move up a few spots. Georgia moves up a couple of spots. UCLA losing to Hawaii. They lose to Hawaii by a field goal. That's UCLA's 2nd loss of the season. San Diego State moves up a couple of spots. Oregon down 8. Florida State moves up 2 spots. Ole Miss, they were on bye as well, so they moved up a couple of spots. And then rounding out your group, you got Virginia Tech, who is hanging on after a 3-point loss to Wake Forest, Coastal Carolina, and then Northern Illinois, the Huskies, enter the top 25 for the very first time this season. They've been having an excellent season in the MAC. They are coming in with an 8-1 overall record. But now we dive right into week number 12 action now. And how about the Cincinnati Bearcats? They are getting a lot of energy around their program all of a sudden, and it's just gonna grow. They take down their typical big brothers in the Buckeye State, the Ohio State Buckeyes, as Cincinnati wins a shocker 45-24. Cincinnati seems like a lock for the Big Ten championship. In other news, Army is preying on Pitt's downfall at this point because of their game earlier this year. Army does beat Penn State 28-14 to control what they can control, but they need help to get to the Conference USA Championship once again. However, you want to talk about playing a little bit of spoiler. LSU is certainly doing that. The Tigers beat Ole Miss 35-21, and that does mean that Ole Miss is likely going to follow this top 25 here, playing a little bit of spoiler late in the year. As for the Washington Huskies, they continue their role for the Northwestern Division, beating Oregon State 45-35. Washington seemed like an afterthought in that part of the Pac-12 conference, but all of a sudden, they control their own destiny. Speaking of teams that control their destiny, Wake Forest has been flying dangerously under the radar, but finally their presence is felt. They beat up Clemson 24-21. And that means Wake Forest looks like they have a real good shot of going to the ACC Championship, coming out of nowhere. Meanwhile, down in the SEC, the Florida State Seminoles continue to prove that they are a top 25 team as they beat USF 45-28. The Bulls need to win one of their next two games to be bowl eligible. And the Texas Longhorns were able to bounce back from their shocking loss to UTEP in their previous week. They beat Houston 24-17. The Texas Longhorns still control their own destiny to get to the Big 12 championship. But how about Coastal Carolina getting some love here? The Chanticleers are ranked in the top 25. They're undefeated in the SEC. And we could maybe see this matchup later on in the season as well, depending on if Miami can get a little bit of help as well. So maybe a little bit of an SEC championship preview type deal. And so far, Coastal Carolina's first ranked game of the season, they're playing well. They're playing hard for sure. A little concerned to see if Coastal Carolina can play up to expectations in the spotlight, but so far they're holding their own. They're up 13-7 as Trevor Vader is looking to change that, but once get a little bit too aggressive, ends up throwing a pass up into double coverage as Trevor Vaden's going to have an interception accounted for his stats, as now Coastal Carolina is looking to hold on and win this game. Can they continue to maintain their effort here in the second half? Midway through the third quarter, Trevor Vaden's going to drop back and fires a bullet over the middle of the Cedric Ward. Ends up being completed for the first down. As the very next play, inside the 5-yard line, they go to the former Heisman Trophy winner, Caleb Kirk. As Caleb Kirk finds the end zone, touchdown Hurricanes. As he expands his career-high mark for most rushing touchdowns in a career. That's 54 for the tailback, as he continues to write his name in the record books here at the University of Miami. But before we get into the end of the third quarter, Coastal Carolina does score one more time. So even with that, the Chanticleers have the lead, but I think Miami knows what they need to do. They gotta ride this running back and let him cook. We'll see if they'll let him cook down here in the goal line yet again, and they will. Caleb Kirk gets untouched into the end zone. Touchdown, Hurricanes. And the Hurricanes will tie it, and they'll eventually take the lead off screen. I didn't get that last touchdown that Miami scored, but with less than 3 minutes left to go, I will capture the touchdown run from Trevor Vaden that is ultimately going to put Coastal Carolina away. The Chanticleers will suffer their first loss in conference play and will likely fall out of the top 25 as well. That does take us into some studio updates here, as San Diego State is narrowly able to pull it out against Hawaii. The Aztecs winning 38-31. Hawaii will need to win their final regular season game in order to be bowl eligible. Meanwhile, we'll focus in more so on the Oklahoma and Tulsa game. Number 8 Oklahoma goes down. A shocker in Tulsa as the Golden Hurricanes win by a couple scores. Finally, last studio update that we have is UCLA taking on Fresno State, and UCLA wins big. So UCLA wins by a massive margin, but remember when Fresno State was a 2-0 team and ranked in the top 25? Yeah, they haven't won since then. They are now on a 8-game losing streak. Pathetic. So we're down to our last couple of weeks of the regular season, and we find ourselves down to just 5 undefeated teams in USC, Nebraska, Missouri, the Michigan Wolverines, and those Cincinnati Bearcats. But it now bears the question, well, who is else in this top 25? That is to be spoken of, right? So not a lot of change in the top 10 at this point in the season, but Miami does move up a couple of spots from that Coastal Carolina win that we did just witness. Iowa, they do also move up a couple of spots as well. They'll have a big test against Michigan that we're going to see here shortly. Texas up a few spots to number 12. They had a nice win against Houston, or at least a nice bounce back win. Washington did beat Oregon State by 10. We did see that I think it was in a simulated game. Georgia moves up 3 even though they're on bye. UCLA, they won big against Fresno State. Oklahoma, though, did not have that same love. We saw their shocking loss to Tulsa. So they fall 8 spots to number 16. That defense really sold them. Actually, the whole team kind of sold them, to be honest. Here's the rest of the top 25 at this point. Oregon's up a couple of spots. Clemson did fall 8 spots to number 19 in the country. And because there were some other top 25 teams that lost, Virginia Tech moved up a couple of spots. And then you got Wake Forest joining in at number 22 in the country. Colorado State is also in as well. They're number 23. Charlotte in at number 24. And then you got the Louisville Cardinals at number 25. So a lot of new teams coming in. We're going to have quite a few top 25 matchups coming our way in week number 13. So it's going to be an absolute barn burner. So now we find ourselves in the final week of the regular season, and oh baby, we are in for a treat here. Many top 25 games happening. We have 6 top 25 games happening in the final week of the regular season. Truly have been absolutely blessed here in these closing weeks here, as we're going to start things out with Michigan hosting Iowa. The Iowa Hawkeyes trying to finish their regular season on a high note, trying to carry some momentum into conference championship week, as we'll likely see Iowa in that American championship. But they got to take on this Michigan team. Michigan close to being ranked number 1 country. They are certainly one of the best teams in America, as they are one of just a few unbeatens left in college football at this point in the year, as Michigan already is up 17-0. So not only are they handling business right now against this Iowa team, they are actually dog walking this Iowa team right now, as they're up 24-0 at the half. And to do it against a team like Iowa, it has been truly impressive to see. But let's see if Michigan can keep it going. First and 10, as Coker is going to, no, it's a fake handoff up the middle, and it's Jeremy Huff who finds the end zone. Touchdown, Wolverines. And Michigan will put up a 30-burger, and it looks like Michigan should win this game unless Iowa can put together some sort of amazing comeback. Kyle Wall, however, in the losing effort, or likely losing effort, I should say, it hasn't been confirmed yet. He does establish the school record for most career receptions at 178. However, 3rd and goal coming up, as Iowa will drop back to throw over the middle, and we'll find Kyle Scott in the end zone. So maybe Iowa is trying to do something here to try to work its way through. Throwing over the right-hand side, that's 2-point conversion is good. So Iowa trying to work its way back into the ball game, but can they handle the Michigan offense? They haven't been able to really find that consistent formula that's worked today defensively for Iowa. But you got to give Michigan credit, though. This offense is phenomenal. This is one of the most balanced teams in America right now. And they might show it even further if they can get this 3rd and 5. Dropping back, gonna find some time. Gonna throw over to the left-hand side and finds Brian Jones for the catch. Brian Jones gets a 6th catch of the day, and it's a big one as it moves the chains. It just kind of puts a stake in the heart for Iowa, seems like, as Michigan is going to ultimately come out of this as winners once again. They absolutely handle Iowa with ease, and the Wolverines will remain undefeated. Meanwhile, we have a big Northwestern Division matchup between Washington and Oregon. Whoever wins this game is likely going to go to the Pac-12 championship. So, big game here for both teams. Washington did end up going to the Pac-12 championship last year, but this year is a whole new year, and Oregon could finally put a change to that, as Washington's going to go ahead and run it out to the right-hand side as Jonah Kaminsky, one of your guys' customs, is able to get a carry and get his biggest run of the day so far. And it sets up 1st and goal, where on a very next play, it's going to be a dot to the corner of the end zone for Tyler Carroll. And Tyler Carroll is going to officially be up 14-0 as Oregon desperately needs to get itself back to the game, even with home field advantage. Man, if they cannot score on this drive, then you could really hear a pin drop here in Offseason Stadium, but they won't have to worry about that yet, because we have a touchdown and Oregon is officially right back in it. Matter of fact, a few minutes later in the ball game, Oregon also has a chance to tie the game, but it's a goal line situation though. Let's see if they can go 2 for 2 on those red zone chances, and they will. Reggie Peterson is gonna score, and it's all knotted up. It will remain knotted up through halftime, so we've got a very competitive game here out in the Pacific Northwestern part of the country, as now we're looking at a goal line situation. Once again, 1st and goal. Gonna try to punch it in and give the lead back to the Huskies, as they will. Jonah Kaminsky finds the end zone. Touchdown, Washington. And so the Huskies are right back up front here at Offseason Stadium. And it won't take very long either for Washington to get another red zone opportunity. Goal line situation. They're going to be bold and going for it on 4th and goal, and it works to perfection. Scott Johnson not be in touch until well after he gets into the end zone. So Washington is starting to pull away, and you could really hear a pin drop, especially after this particular run. J.J. Cullen is going to score for the Huskies again, and they just continue to pour it on here in the second half. The Huskies, they just absolutely love this run-heavy approach, grind them down, and it's working to perfection right now because they are grinding Oregon down right now. Jonah Kaminsky is going to score again, and it's going to be a convincing win for Washington that will very likely cement their trip to the Pac-12 championship. Speaking of those championship game implications, we got one here between Nebraska and Missouri, and that border war rivalry, for that border war victory bell, it's no joke. These two teams hate each other, so expect some feistiness here in this particular game. The winner going to the American Conference Championship game, and right now Nebraska does have the slight edge, but Fabian France is going to cut this deficit practically in half. They're right back in it. Late in the third quarter, Missouri's quarterback is going to scramble himself, and Bo Robinson has been one of the more mobile quarterbacks in America, actually starting to close in on 1,000 yards on the season. As we now get into the fourth quarter of action, throwing over the middle to the FCS transfer, Peter Bowen, as Peter Bowen will score for the Missouri Tigers. As now, Missouri actually has a chance to take the lead, as they do have yet another red zone opportunity. Second and goal coming up here, just 5 yards separating them from the lead. Looking over to the left-hand side, and I thought Bo Robinson had a play, but it will end up being intercepted instead, and that will seal it. Nebraska beats Missouri 28-14 being your final score. But we have another top 25 games. Yes, they're just going to keep coming here. Clemson is going to take on Virginia Tech here, but not as much implications as what we saw in the last couple of games, because these two teams are not ahead in their ACC division that they're in, because Wake Forest has been making as much noise that they've had at the conference level. So this is not a game that would decide who goes to the ACC championship. This is simply to try and keep up with Wake Forest, because trust me, both of these teams would still need help in order to get to the ACC championship game. But the loser, one thing that is clear, the loser is going to be out of it. So, lots to consider here as we jump into the second quarter. All knotted up at 7. Clemson does have a chance to go ahead and take the lead, and Kyle Watt gets a good run there, makes it a very manageable third down. But both teams bring the goal line passes out, but it's not a run to the inside, it's to the outside, where no one was around, and that gives Kyle Watt time to find the end zone. Touchdown, Tigers! So Clemson takes a 14-7 lead, and that will likely be retained as we go into halftime, as Andrew Gray, the freshman safety, is going to get a key interception here. Good play for the freshman to step up and make a big play there in the regard. As now we're looking at this 14-7 game, and Clemson now has a chance to maybe pull away before we go into halftime, as the quarterback gets a 40-yard run to start the drive, leading to a red zone opportunity, which is cashed in right away by Colton Allen. So maybe that could be a huge swing in the big scope of things, but we still have a lot of football left to be played, and it's still a close game in spite of that. As now, 2nd and 5 coming up, as they're going to throw again over the middle, and I thought that was going to be a touchdown there, but Chris Leverford will not be given a good spot. They're going to mark him at the 1, but I really did thought that, hey, maybe he actually did punch it in there. Thankfully, it won't have a big deal in the large scope of things, but Clemson, Leverford probably was feeling some type of way having that touchdown robbed from him. But his team is still winning, and his team is still winning by even more so. Up 35-14, as now Virginia Tech is looking to try to work itself back in, just trying not to be blown out by any means. But with 4 minutes left to play, Clemson is going to run one more read option with Marcus Andrews. And I feel like even though this game has officially have not hit triple zeros, the Hokies might be cooked here. As even with that throw, maybe they could do something there. Maybe get an onside kick. You get a little bit lucky, but onside kicks are pretty hard to actually go ahead and accomplish. And this will be no exception, as Clemson will ultimately recover the onside kicks, and Clemson will win this key ACC matchup. So while we're waiting for the next couple of top 25 matchups to get started here, we're going to take a quick little break to check out some other scores around the country real fast. So Georgia's going to be able to take down Georgia Southern 44-7. While the Bulldogs got off to a rough start, they are quietly putting themselves in a spot where they could be playing for an at-large position here late in the season. And then the same could also be said for the Miami Hurricanes as well. They get into a shootout with USF, but they stayed resilient. They win 54-41, and Miami does finish with a pretty good record at 9-3, and they're a top 10 team, so they're also in that positioning to be an at-large squad in the college football playoff as well. But let's continue our Week 13 action, jumping into this Battle of LA. Now, USC has already essentially clinched a trip to the Pac-12 championship, but this is big for UCLA, not because this is a rivalry game. Rivalry games are always important, regardless of what else is at stake. Like, even if this was like 1 in 10 teams, right? Like, these two teams would still clearly care about it. But that being said, UCLA, if they were to win this game, they could really boost their chances to getting an at-large bid into the college football playoff. But USC is not an easy team to beat. I mean, they have not been beaten in a very long time at this point. But here we are in the second half, and here we are, USC kind of on the back foot, and now just needing some plays from Victor Spence just to tie things up in the first place. So needless to say, UCLA is giving it everything that they have right now, but Victor Spence is going to throw a dot to Patrick Hill into the end zone there. It's a touchdown for the Trojans. So we are all knotted up at 17 apiece there, as UCLA will also drive down the length of the field with their quarterback Brandon Hollis, as Hollis is going to go ahead and run it to the perimeter with the tailback Adam Black, and Adam Black will give the lead back to UCLA. However, USC will look to control the fourth quarter, and with this throw, they will set the tone, as USC will actually go on and dominate the fourth quarter. The Trojans winning this 34-24 as your final score. Now, as for the other top 25 game that we have, we got the Charlotte 49ers and Wake Forest getting ready to go ahead and play each other here real quick. Now, this being said, it's a cold game, snow is falling, and it could get a little bit on the sloppy side after that. But these two teams, they just got ranked as well. So I'm actually a little surprised that this ended up turning into a top 25 game, but I'm certainly not going to complain about sneaking in some Charlotte 49er highlights, because Charlotte, with less than a minute left in this first half, finally breaks the touchdown virginity in this game, as Sylvester Lee was just wide butt naked open there. However, their kicker does end up missing the extra point there. So 6-3, a pretty ugly first half overall. We'll see if anything happens to change here in this second half. Charlotte up 13-3 as we get into a goal line situation yet again. Firing over to the left-hand side, and it's caught for a touchdown. Jason Spurlock, who comes in as the backup, just throws his third pass of the entire game, and is pretty effective with that pass, is able to score with his receivers. Meanwhile, Wake Forest will respond with a touchdown of their own, but it might be a little too late at this point, as Charlotte will go on and win convincingly 30-17, holding off on Wake Forest's chances of going to the ACC championship. Now, we do also have some studio updates that have happened from around the country, such as TCU beating Tulsa 16-14, and with this win, TCU puts themselves in a must-win game against Oklahoma. If they can beat Oklahoma, they're going to go to the Big 12 championship. And then Marshall beats Notre Dame 27-19. The Thundering Herd also silently putting together an excellent season. Now, a couple more games of note that I did want to talk about before we get into this final week of the regular season is that we actually had a couple of notable upsets happen. Rice is able to get over the top and beat Texas 38-28. So if Texas loses another conference game and Rice wins, Rice could be finding themselves in the Big 12 championship all of a sudden. And then UCF in overtime was also able to beat Florida 29-26, and this is a big deal in the Peach Division as well, because UCF is another team that's played very well in conference play, and they have a legitimate shot at the SEC championship game, at least make an appearance for the SEC championship. So this now takes us into the final week of the regular season. So this is what we got going on going into that final week. Not a lot happening in terms of major games happening, but what we did end up seeing is a little bit of muscle movement here towards the end. Missouri, they only fell a few spots to number 6, so if they beat Texas A&M, they should be a virtual lock to make the college football playoff, even as an at-large. Washington is also able to sneak in as well into the top 10. They're putting together a good season and will likely play USC in that Pac-12 championship game. Georgia is also in a pretty good position. They're going to look to finish strong against Georgia Tech. Oklahoma is up to number 12 in the country. They'll take on TCU, having a good year. San Diego State almost lost to Fresno State, but they finished the regular season 9-3. You got Clemson up 5 spots. Iowa fell 4 spots. Florida State did move up 4 spots as well to number 16. UCLA only moved a couple of spots down. They were in it till the end, but they had it lost like right in front of our eyes. Florida is down 11 spots. That's a massive drop for them, and they got to go and play Florida State now, so that's not going to be an easy game at all. Texas is down 7 spots. Charlotte up 4. They're up to number 20 in the nation. Colorado State moves up a couple of spots, and then you got a few newcomers here towards the bottom. Memphis is back in at number 22 in the country. Oregon is still clinging on to number 23, and then rounding out your top 25 now is Arkansas at 24, and then Coastal Carolina back in at number 25 in the country. So we get things going here to start rivalry week, and some of these games, man, some of these games are why you play the game. Georgia Tech is going to start out by upsetting Georgia 38-35. Not only does it get Georgia Tech into a bowl game, but also Georgia's any chance that they had at an at-large bid in the playoff is now gone. Texas, however, is able to beat the Baylor Bears 35-16, so that means Texas will go to the Big 12 championship. It's unclear whether they get to host or not. Ohio State is also able to beat Michigan 38-35, securing Ohio State's bowl bid, as well as maybe Cincinnati's chance to host the Big 10 championship game as well. LSU is also able to pull the upset off on Arkansas 34-31, which likely means that Arkansas, who's likely going to go to that Sun Belt championship game, will probably fall out of the top 25 for this. And finally, Washington State is able to pull an upset in the Apple Cup. They pour 56 on the Washington Huskies as they will finish their year off on a high note, while Washington is probably going to kind of lean into this Pac-12 championship game. They got some problems that they have to work through, however. So the final major regular season game that we do end up having is number 18 Florida going and taking on this number 16 ranked Florida State squad. Now, that being said, this still has some big implications, even though Florida State is likely going to go to the SEC championship anyways. Florida can still play a little bit of spoiler, and if Florida can beat Florida State as well, it could boost their at-large chances as well going into these final weeks of the regular season, as well as maybe get a little bit of lady luck on their side for conference championship weekend, right? So right now it's a 14-7 game after Mike Coleman gets the Florida Gators on the board. But Florida State's looking good here. They're proving that, hey, they're not going to take Florida lightly by any means, and they shouldn't, because this is certainly another one of those rivalry games as well. As we're looking at a second and goal opportunity, as Florida State is going to keep it with Terrence Garcia to find the end zone. Touchdown, Seminoles! And the Florida State crowd is absolutely loving it right now, with a 21-7 lead and a chance to make it even bigger after another big throw to the custom Michael Tremaine. Michael Tremaine winning that one-on-one with ease, and it almost seems like Florida State is getting ready to run away with it here. And with another red zone opportunity, they could have certainly done that, but maybe that play changes everything. I mean, that pass was going to be a touchdown, but the receiver dropped it and it ends up in the hands of a Florida defender instead. So a tough break for Terrence Garcia, who is going to have his interception counted against him, but realistically it wasn't really his fault. It wasn't his fault at all, as now 28-14 is your score, as Sam Tremblay is going to get Florida inside the 5-yard line, and this touchdown is going to get Florida inside one possession. It's going to be a one possession game here in the fourth quarter, and we thought Florida State was just going to run the Gators out of the building, and that just hasn't happened. That has not happened at all, and we might be looking at overtime depending on what happens here on this drive. Florida State does score again. We did not capture that touchdown, but Florida State does have the lead. That's the most important thing. Let's see what Florida does with what could potentially be their last drive of the game. 2nd and 6 coming up. Dropping backs. Got some time. Throws to the left-hand side, and it's caught by Alex Williams inside the 15-yard line, and the Gators are on the move once again. 2nd and short. The playbook completely opened and finds Kevin Robinson in the end zone. Touchdown, Gators! And that means that what we saw in the first 60 minutes is not going to be enough. We will officially be going into overtime here in year number 6, one of these finals regular season games. 2nd and 8 coming up. Dropping back. Firing over the middle, and it's caught! Kevin Robinson finds the end zone. Touchdown, Gators! And Florida State fails to score as well. They actually had the ball before this. So this right here, dagger. Complete and utter dagger. So Florida is going to come out as a winner in this one. That being said, we do have some studio updates as well. Fresno State beats Hawaii 10-0. So Fresno State wins for the first time since like September. And then Cal is going to finish the year 7-5 as well, after a 3-point win over Nevada. Now, that rivalry game was the only rivalry game that we saw that actually was a top 25 matchup, but there were still a few other top 25 teams that notably played though. Missouri does finish the season out by beating Texas A&M in overtime. Missouri wins 34-31, and while they won't be in the American Championship game, we'll likely see Missouri still make the college football playoff as an at-large if everything holds out. At Clemson Tigers, speaking of those at-large bids, Clemson keeps itself alive for possibly getting one of those bids as well. They beat South Carolina 24-19. However, in a big shocker here, Notre Dame is going to be able to shock USC 46-42. USC suffers its first loss of the season, and now it becomes more important for the Trojans to win that Pac-12 championship game next week. Finally, in the Battle of the Civil War Series, Oregon's going to be able to beat Oregon State 33-21, as that will be enough to keep Oregon ranked in the top 25 as of right now. Alright, so that does mean that the regular season comes to an end, so we take a quick look to see how did conference championship games end up shaking out. Who's going to have a chance to compete for one of those automatic bids into the college football playoff? Every conference does get one. So we'll start with the back. We got Western Kentucky actually making an appearance not only in the top 25 but in the MAC championship game as well. They have to travel to Northern Illinois. The Huskies did have a chance to go last season, but they did end up losing to Louisville. NIU will seek some revenge in that regard. We also have Cincinnati hosting Michigan for the Big Ten Championship. Cincinnati does finish the regular season undefeated. We also have Texas actually getting to host the Big 12 Championship game. They'll take on an Oklahoma team that is also ranked in the top 10. We do also have the Sun Belt going on. The Sun Belt surprisingly one of the weaker conferences this year. This is actually the only championship game that does not feature a top 25 team. Going into some of the later games that we have, Pittsburgh is going to host Navy for the Conference USA Championship. Navy winning it last season. Couple of new faces, though, in the SEC Championship though. Coastal Carolina able to win the Peach Division and actually gets to host the SEC Championship. They will be hosting Florida State, who's coming off of that tough loss against the Florida Gators. That being said, the American Championship game features the #1 team in America right now, the Nebraska Cornhuskers. If they win, they will have likely the #1 seed in the Tournament of Champions. Iowa will be a tough challenge, though, as they're number 13 in the country. We'll also have a rare top 25 matchup in the Mountain West Championship. Colorado State getting to host, surprisingly. The Rams come in ranked number 17 in the country, while the Arizona Wildcats come in at number 5. In a big surprise in the ACC Championship, Wake Forest does get in. They do beat Appalachian State, but on the other side, you got North Carolina. The Tar Heels of North Carolina beat Duke, so they got their get back from last season. So North Carolina is here in this ACC Championship, even though North Carolina is not even bowl eligible. Isn't that an absolute twist? One win away from seeing possibly a 6-7 team suddenly compete for a national championship all of a sudden. And then wrapping things up here, we got the Pac-12 Championship. USC, number 8 in the country. They did fall 7 spots. They'll take on Washington, who just got shell-shocked by Washington State in the Apple Cup, and it forced Washington to fall outside of that top 25 completely. So let's go ahead and get into conference championships right away. We'll start with the Big 12 Championship. Oklahoma is going to be taking on the Texas Longhorns, as this will be the first of many automatic bids that will be determined here in this portion of the video, as Mark Kelly is going to get the Texas Longhorns just within a few yards. Yes, just a few yards from getting into that end zone right away. As we get into a goal line situation yet again, the Texas Longhorns find the end zone, and they will open up the scoring here in Austin, Texas. They will quickly take that 7-0 lead. However, late in the first quarter, Oklahoma will quickly respond with a score of their own from Cody Wilkerson, who actually scores his first career touchdown as an Oklahoma Sooner. The Oklahoma team is looking for a lot more of that in the future, as many freshmen are stepping up for the Oklahoma squad. Ron Baker being another one, forcing that fumble recovery and stopping Texas from scoring. So here we are in the second half, and it's still a very tight ball game between these two teams. 7-all being your score at this very moment, as we are looking at a 7-7 game. As now Texas is going to try to get into the end zone and try to take the lead, and they will with Jason Jackson. Touchdown, Texas! And the Texas Longhorns will take the lead. Moving on to late in the third quarter, though, as Texas has a chance to bring the hammer down, so this turns into an extremely critical possession for the Oklahoma Sooners, whose season might very well be hanging in the balance. As now, 2nd and 2 coming up, looking over to the right-hand side, getting out to the tight end, who still remains on his feet and forces his way into the end zone. Touchdown, Texas! And Texas has their longest lead of the day of 21-7. Oklahoma will answer back with a score of their own, but they are going to fall just short here, as the Texas Longhorns will be your champions of the Big 12 after all, as they will knock off the Oklahoma Sooners. Oklahoma will have to wait for a chance to see if they get an at-large bid or not, because they do have a pretty good ranking, but Texas will be your Big 12 champions. But we still have many other conference championship games to sort out, such as number 24 Navy going on the road to take on number 3 Pittsburgh for the right to be champions of the Conference USA. Navy winning the Conference USA championship last season, but Pittsburgh having an excellent season here thus far, 11-1. Pittsburgh winning this game could put themselves, they could actually mess around and sneak into a top 2 seed, but Navy clearly has some other plans here, as Navy is not only beating Pittsburgh right now, they are just dominating the Pittsburgh Panthers at this very moment, as Leslie Culp He may have only gotten a couple of yards on that reception, but it's a big reception because it helps him establish a school record for most receptions in a career. He's the first Navy wide receiver with 250 catches to his name. So congratulations to Wesley Culp on that school record. And more importantly, Navy is going to drive deeper in to Pittsburgh territory thanks to, those plays that he's made over the years. So, third and inches coming up as Pittsburgh tries to hold it down, but Jason Anderson will find a crack in his own defense. A touchdown for Navy. And after that, it was just simply barbecue chicken as Navy is able to stun the Pittsburgh Panthers on the road and dominate in emphatic fashion. Navy will be going back to the college football playoff as now two-time defending Conference USA champions, beating out Pittsburgh 52-17. Pittsburgh will have to wait for an at-large. Meanwhile, the SEC championship will likely be a one-bid league between these two teams here, as Florida State and Coastal Carolina both sit outside of the top 14, so one of them will only be getting in because of that automatic bid most likely. So let's go ahead and dive into this SEC championship that is being played in beautiful Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, home of the Coastal Carolina Chanticleers. However, the Chanticleers are having a rough time in the spotlight right now as they're getting off to a little bit of a slow start. They already gave up a touchdown early in that first quarter of action, as now Florida State is back in the red zone yet again and having a tough time dealing with that triple option as Dwayne Walden finds the end zone for the Florida State Seminoles. So it's already 14-0 here as Florida State looks to continue to go to work. Terrence Garcia, he's going to run it into the end zone for the touchdown, as that will indeed make it 21-0. And we'll see if they can put a little bit of icing on the cake as they'll run it up the gut with Travis Beach, who just barely could not get into the end zone there, but a short 3rd and goal coming up. Coastal Carolina just needing some sort of spark to keep themselves in this game, and it's just simply not going to happen here. So Florida State is also going to dominate in their conference championship game as the Seminoles are going to easily top Coastal Carolina. Doesn't change the fact that the Chanticleers had an excellent season. They've really truly had one of the better seasons in their time in the NCSL, but for Florida State it was too much. But one of the most anticipated conference championship games that we have is Iowa taking on Nebraska. Now, Nebraska does come in as the #1 team in America. So winning this particular game is going to put them over the top in regards to, hey, if you win this game, you are going to have a bye in the college football playoff. They'll lock in that #1 seed, while Iowa seeks their first college football playoff appearance in this series. And of course, we are here in year number 6 as Kyle Scott is going to give the Iowa Hawkeyes a lead with less than 9 minutes left in the game, and Iowa will use that to hang on by a thread. It was more of that Iowa style game that we're used to seeing in real life. There was not a lot of scoring here in this American Conference Championship game, but nonetheless, Iowa was able to win out 16-13 being your final score. So Iowa will be your conference champions. Nebraska will likely still get in, but as an at-large instead. Meanwhile, in what is a more anticipated game than usual in the Mountain West, number 5 Arizona makes the trip to the Rocky Mountains to take on number 17 Colorado State. These two teams both had historic seasons at their respective programs, but can Arizona get into the playoff? Now, Arizona, if they win this game, not only would they be in the playoff, obviously, but they will get a home game as well. So Arizona would be in a great spot to at least move on to the quarterfinals. However, Colorado State has something to say about that as they jump to a 14-0 lead against this Arizona Wildcats team. As Cody Kessler II, he was actually originally at USC, transferred to Arizona after year number 4. So he's been at Arizona for a couple of years now. he's going to try to complete Arizona's ascension in the college football world. But it would help if their kicker actually made an extra point, but that did not quite happen here. So 14-6 is your score as Arizona is going to recover a fumble. Wildcats ball, and the Wildcats have a chance to tie. Let's see if Cody Kessler's kid can make something shake here. Throwing to the left-hand side and throws a dot to Maurice Rivero, driving them deep into Ram territory. However, trying to throw over the middle as his receiver drops it from the hard hit. And it ends up being picked off. So unlucky for Cody Kessler, as it's what goes from a possible short gain to a pick six. A tough look for Cody Kessler to second. But right before the end of the first half, he does compose himself a little bit, but gets sacked in the backfield though. So Cody Kessler is going to have to call his guys quickly. Likely will be the final play of the first half. Kessler drops back, looks right, and finds his man right in the crease. Touchdown, Wildcats. So the Wildcats are right back into the game, but they're down by quite a bit, however, down by 8. Let's see if they have that fire within them to come back and win this thing, and that touchdown will certainly help. But they're also going to go for the 2-point conversion, though, as Kessler looks around, fires over the middle, and finds Jared Utley in the end zone. Touchdown, Wildcats. So it is all knotted up at 21, of course. So got a very good game here in the Mountain West Championship that might be going to that final buzzer. We'll see who wants it more, as Arizona has a chance to take the lead for the first time today as they try to run the Wildcat. And the Wildcat works for the Wildcats as Josh Ford scampers into the end zone. Another touchdown for Arizona. So on 28-21 as we get into the last 3 minutes of the ball game. Kessler the second looking to throw deep downfield. He wanted the kill shot, but he might have breathed life into Colorado State instead, as the Rams will now take over in Arizona territory. A chance for them to possibly tie, as they will go ahead and rely on their quarterback, Justin Johnson, who does get them into the red zone. And on the very next play, he's going to run a little option action here. Justin Johnson on his own and finds the end zone. Touchdown, Rams. All knotted up at 28. Arizona could not do anything with the ball in the next possession. And so the Rams in the final moments drive downfield, and they are going to kick the game-winning field goal. Colorado State is going to upset the Arizona Wildcats 31-28. They're going to the playoff. And that leaves us with one major conference championship game left. It is number 11 Michigan making the trip down to Cincinnati. The Nasty Natty Cats are going for their first playoff appearance in this series as well. Cincinnati mostly been a below average program in this series, but they're looking to change those fortunes here. They just got to win this one game against Michigan, but Michigan has been extremely difficult to beat this year as well. Should be in for a good matchup, but one that Cincinnati is ready for, as Andre Key finds the end zone. Touchdowns, Nasty Natty! And so we got a tie ball game on our hands. However, midway through the second quarter, though, quarterback's going to drop back to pass and find Zach Jones, who works his way into the end zone. Another touchdown for the Cardiac Cats, as they will take the lead for the first time today. But Michigan will respond quickly with a score of their own, so still 14-all. Basically a 0-0 game if you think about it, as Brad Griffin will look to change that, get inside the 5. However, Brad Griffin also did end up hurting himself, so going to go back to that old-fashioned ground game as Andre Key finds the end zone. Another touchdown for Cincinnati. So Bearcats are up by 7, less than 2 minutes left to play in the first half, as Michigan looks to get one more score on the board before we do go into halftime. 1:25 left to play and counting. Blaylock's going to drop back. He's going to set up the screen beautifully, and he's got some space to work through down the sideline. Does not completely get to the outside, but still a great catch as Jeremy Huff gets Michigan inside the 30-yard line We're on the very next play after that. Blaylock got some time, throws over the middle, and his receiver is going to do the rest. Bryant Jones finds the end zone, and Michigan's going to nod things up at 21 apiece. So, with that being said, we got the second half that we have to look forward to, as whoever does end up winning that second half is going to ultimately win this Big Ten championship game. Let's see who wants it more here. 2nd and 3 coming up as Michigan lines up. No, it's not a run, but a pass instead. Got a man open on the S is Mario Sims. And now Michigan has their first lead of the day. And after that, Michigan just never looked away. After that, Michigan is going to dominate this second half after that. And they will be going to the college football playoff as champions of the Big Ten, while Cincinnati will have to await their fate as an at-large bid, but they should have done just enough. But now let's go ahead and check in on some of the less notable conference championship games that happened. Starting with the MAC championship, we had a battle of 10-win teams between Western Kentucky and Northern Illinois. NIU will be the team that comes out on top. Fellow offensive coordinator Isaac Thompson is able to beat Doug Rose and the Hilltoppers offense 52-38, which means NIU will be the representative for the MAC conference in the college football playoff. As for Mississippi State, they beat Arkansas 49-35, and although Mississippi State is not ranked in this top 25, that being said, Mississippi State will be also making a trip into the college football playoff as well. And then in one of the bigger surprises that we have seen, North Carolina kept it close against Wake Forest the entire game, and they found a way to come out on top with less than 2 minutes left to play. A 15-yard touchdown strike leads North Carolina over Wake Forest. So in spite of the Tar Heels being below 500, because they're the ACC champions, they will also be in the college football playoff as well. And finally, USC was able to beat Washington 49-28 in the Pac-12 title game, which means that USC will have an opportunity to defend its national championship. So after careful deliberation, this is what your college football playoff bracket is going to look like in year number 6. This is the first time that we actually have not seen a single undefeated team in the entirety of the college football playoff, and those at-large teams certainly benefited quite heavily in this matter. 4 of your top 5 teams are actually from those at-large. They are not conference champions. Missouri did not play in the conference championship. Neither did Army or Miami, who got in as a 2 and a 5 seed respectfully. Nebraska, while they lost the American Championship game, still got in as they did not slip very much. They only slipped a couple of spots. So this is what your matchups are going to be. Texas is going to take on Colorado State, who represents for the Mountain West. Miami will take on the champions of the MAC in Northern Illinois. Michigan, who you just saw win the Big Ten championship, will go ahead and play against Mississippi State, who actually did end up winning the Sun Belt. USC is going to take on the Navy, who did win the Conference USA. Iowa, who won the American, will take on the SEC champion Florida State. And rounding it out will be the at-large Nebraska taking on North Carolina, who won the ACC. So even though they're a 6 and 7 team, because they won their conference, they still automatically got in, albeit it's as the lowest seed in this tournament, that 14 seed. Now, with this bracket being released, there was certainly a fair share of teams that felt like, hey, we absolutely got the short end of the sticks. You know that Cincinnati Bearcats squad? Well, Cincinnati actually ends up being the last team out because 4 of the top 5 teams were actually not conference champions. So all of the at-large bids were taken up by top 5 teams. And look who's one of the teams that moves ahead of them. Miami, which I'm sure is going to have some people feeling some type of way. Very disappointing to see for Cincinnati. felt like they deserved to get in for sure. Other teams that felt like they might have been snubbed include San Diego State, who does finish the regular season in the top 10, Pittsburgh, who end up losing in the Conference USA Championship pretty convincingly, Arizona, who had that close loss to Colorado State, Clemson, who had a good season, and then, yeah, that rounds up your group. But man, this was a brutal conference championship weekend, one that has plenty of upsets and plenty of twists of the road, per se. But before we go ahead and check out the college football playoff and how that plays out, we still can't forget about bowl season, because while bowl season may not be the ultimate destination, we still want to celebrate the teams that, hey, even though they didn't make the playoff, still had good enough seasons to be recognized by various bowl games that are happening around the country. And while I am not going to show every single bowl game, I definitely want to check in on some of the notable ones, because we certainly have some good bowl games that were happening around the country. So let's go ahead and get this bowl season started. And we start with a little bit of Las Vegas Bowl action. Number 17 Oklahoma taking on number 11 Pittsburgh in that Sin City. We'll see what ends up coming out on top. Pittsburgh and Oklahoma representing their conferences respectfully, as they both finish as runners-up in the Big 12 and the Conference USA respectfully. So it would be good to see which team can come out on top here. It looks like Oklahoma is going to be in a little bit of trouble here. Down 10-0. There hasn't been a lot of scoring. And in these types of games where scoring has really become a premium, you got to take advantage of these red zone opportunities. And will they do that? Well, I'm not too terribly sure, to be honest with you, but we're here in the start of the fourth quarter. Oklahoma is down on the goal line. They need these points, and they're going to get them. So with 8:10 left in the game, Oklahoma finally gets on the board. However, they do end up missing the extra point, though. So they're down by 4. And on Pittsburgh's very next drive, the Panthers will respond in kind with a touchdown of their own. So it should be barbecue chicken. Except with 2.5 minutes left, Oklahoma trying to get into the end zone one more time. But time is of the essence. 2 minutes left to play, and they'll need to score here and also get the onside kick, and they don't get it. It's picked off in the end zone, and Pittsburgh seals victory in the Las Vegas Bowl against number 17 Oklahoma. But it was not the only top 25 matchup that we did have going on in bowl game action. We have number 22 Oregon getting ready to go at it against number 20 Memphis, as we'll get ready and jump right into it. Midway through the second quarter, a pretty competitive game between these two teams, although Memphis is trying to let it slip away as they've turned the ball over multiple times, but it hasn't stopped Memphis from at least keeping themselves in this ball game. They actually will end up taking the lead later on in the second quarter. As now 2 minutes left here in the second quarter, Oregon has a chance to retake the lead, and they will with their quarterback, Joe Anderson, who finds the end zone. Touchdown Ducks! And Oregon retakes the lead here in the City of Motors. That Quick City Lane Bowl about to be going crazy, especially depending on what happens here towards the end of the first half. Third and long coming up as Caden McPherson, one of your guys' customs. He's going to dump it out onto the perimeter for the tailback on the screen, and Mark Daughtry is going to get a lot of open space here. A 20-yard gain on the play. As now, 1st and 10 coming up. McPherson again wants to fire deep downfield, and it's caught nearly for a touchdown, but it's going to end up at the 1-yard line, where McPherson is going to handle the rest. He jukes away from a defender, and just like that, the Memphis Tigers are going to be taking the lead. So 21-20 is your score going into the half, and it remains that score for a good chunk of this third quarter, but about halfway through that third quarter to get that second half started, And it is still a very tight game between these two teams here. Really could go either way, but Oregon is going to take the lead with 3:29 left to play in that third quarter of action, as the Oregon Ducks do find the end zone. And then they'll also go for the 2-point conversion, and the 2-point conversion is no good. Marcus Seymour is going to be left just well short of that touchdown marker. So the Memphis Tigers are only down by 5, and a touchdown will take the lead, but a devastating fumble on the field. Oh, he can't stay on his feet, but big time play by the defensive Oregon, as the Ducks are able to hold, and they'll eventually turn that into a touchdown the other way. So Memphis is down by 12, less than 4 minutes and 40 seconds left to play as well. Can Caden McPherson cook up a miracle? First and goal, dropping back, looks over the middle of the field, it's got a man in the end zone. Touchdown Tigers! And Tigers are only down by 5 with 3:30 left to play, but they gotta get a stop. This is not how you go about doing it, as Joe Anderson almost runs it into the end zone, but it does allow the Oregon Ducks to run out some clock and ultimately put the lights out in this quick lane bowl special. The Oregon Ducks are going to win this one 40-28. Oregon finishes the season out on a high note. So one more notable bowl game that I want to dive into. It's San Diego State taking on the Cincinnati Bearcats out here in Orlando, Florida. And at least for Cincinnati got Ryan, man. Most years, an at-large that's ranked number 6 in the country would be in the playoff, but this was just a very unlucky year, unfortunately. So that does mean that Cincinnati, while they still get to go to a really good bowl game, I'm sure they would have loved being able to try and compete for that national championship game. And it just did not happen here necessarily, but we should still have a very good game on our hands, as San Diego State does score a couple of touchdowns. They take that 14-7 lead, but Cincinnati will certainly try to answer right back on their own as well. They do face a 3rd and long coming up, as their quarterback's going to drop back, looks over the middle of the field, got a receiver, and Zach Jones not only finds the first down, he also finds the end zone himself, and allows Cincinnati to tie this game up. Jumping into the second half, we still have a very tightly contested second half that we have going on, so let's see if someone can cook here. 3rd and goal, Cincinnati looks to have their biggest lead of the day, and they're going to get it. Anthony Lewis finds the end zone. Touchdown Cincinnati, and the Bearcats are up 24-14 here, and they have a chance to close the door and really finish this season on an amazing note, beating a top 10 team even in bowl season. That is a major accomplishment for sure. So let's see if they can get the job done. 1st and 10, however, Tim Stallings is going to find the end zone for the Aztecs, and he'll cut it down to just a field goal. Late in the 3rd quarter, though, Cincinnati has a chance to answer right back as they run a little bit of read option down the sideline, and nearly finding the end zone is that quarterback Brad Griffin, who's been on top of his game today. It sets up a short 2nd and goal opportunity, which will be cashed in by Andre Key, and it allows Cincinnati to win that Citrus Bowl against the Aztecs. As for other notable bowl games that happened before we get into this college football playoff here, Western Kentucky is able to beat Arizona in the famous Idaho Potato Bowl, so Arizona finishes on a 2-game losing streak, while Western Kentucky does win 11 games on the year. We also have Clemson taking care of Indiana in the Duke's Mayo's Bowl, 34-7, but shout out to that Indiana Hoosier squad for actually making a bowl game for the first time in this series. We had a close one in the Holiday Bowl in what was essentially a home game for UCLA, but in spite of that, UCLA almost loses this one. It was a 45-42 shootout win over Virginia Tech. Charlotte was also another team that finishes in the top 20, but that might change as Rice is able to beat Charlotte 37-17. Wisconsin is able to beat UTEP 31-17 in the Armed Forces Bowl, so Wisconsin finishes a strong season, having a pretty tough schedule, one of the toughest in the country. Ohio State, however, had a very disappointing season, but they are able to finish it on a high note as they do beat a ranked Florida team in the Music City Bowl 28-16. And rounding out your notable bowl games, you got Georgia taking on North Texas in the Liberty Bowl. Georgia is able to win pretty comfortably here, winning 38-13 over the Mean Green. But now let's go ahead and get the college football playoff officially underway. And we'll get things started here with number 19, Florida State, going on the road to take on the number 7 ranked Iowa Hawkeyes, as Iowa's looking to go to work here. Drew Robinson almost gets the first touchdown for Iowa, but fumbles it in the end zone. So all of that work to get down by the goal line is not going to lead to anything at all. 0 points for the Iowa Hawkeyes on that red zone possession. And that's just a tough look to see, as now Florida State has the chance to get their first points of this college football playoff, as they'll hand the ball right up the gut for Travis Beach, and he picks up a pretty solid chunk of yards there. He picks up 7 yards on that run. They're going to Travis Beach quite a bit in this first quarter. He already has 8 catches, make that 9 touches, and look at this effort, running through everybody in the state of Iowa as Florida State gets on the board first. But it's been a low-scoring game beyond that, so we jump over to the fourth quarter of action. It's a very tight game here. Iowa only down by 4. But they do have a chance to take the lead late, and they will with Drew Robinson. Drew Robinson will score, and that does give Iowa the lead. However, later in the fourth quarter, Florida State will respond in kind with a touchdown themselves on the read option. So Terrence Garcia does give Florida State the lead once again. As now, just 30 seconds left in the game. Iowa trying to time this thing up, and they will! Taking it all the way to the end zone. Touchdown, Dion Wilson. And the Hawkeyes are now tied up. And we might very well be looking at an overtime opportunity. At least depending on what we see here with less than 10 minutes left in the game, as now we're down to the final play of regulation. They're going to try to send this one deep. It's up in the air. They got bodies, and it's caught. It's caught by the Seminoles. Nick Robinson is going to send Florida State to the next round of college football playoff, and it ends in a stunner in Kinnick Stadium. So we'll see if some of these other quarterfinal games can live up to the rest of the insanity, as USC and Navy getting ready to go at it actually here, as USC is looking to go to work. Andrew Wilson is looking to get the first points on the board for the USC Trojans, and he does get it down to the goal line. However, very next play, again, going to Wilson. Wilson almost finds his way into the end zone there, but again, another quality run, just gashing this Naval defense very early on. It eventually does lead to a touchdown for the backup tailback in Kyle Robinson, who will score the first points of this game between Navy and USC. Meanwhile, second and short coming up for the midshipmen in the middle of the second quarter, and Navy has since responded to the initial southpaw from USC. As now, first and goal coming up, Navy has a chance to take the lead. Going to hand off to tailback, who breaks the tackle. Thought about breaking another one, but was double team on that second effort, as Kurt Burnett gets the midshipmen down inside the 5-yard line. We're on the very next run. The quarterback, Gavin Johnson, is going to give the midshipmen a lead to work through, as the midshipmen are giving the defending national champions everything that they can handle right now. And oh baby, they sure are, because Here we are deep in the second half, and we still see USC down at the moment. At home and facing some serious adversity here in that first round of the college football playoff. As Andrew Wilson will get yet another carry, and he's been busy today, but averaging over 5 yards a carry. But it will end in a Patrick Hill touchdown as USC will take the lead. Now, less than 6 minutes left to play. Navy will respond in kind with a touchdown themselves. One that will help Wesley Kolb continue to build upon his school record for most receiving touchdowns in a career. His 35th receiving touchdown. We'll see if they go back to him for the 2-point conversion. And looks like they go to somebody else, but the 2-point conversion is still good. So, USC is down to its last gasp of air here, down by 7. Minute left in the ball game. Can Victor Spence keep the repeat hopes alive? They got to convert this 4th down first. Spence got some time in the pocket. He's looking to his right, fires downfield, and the prayer is answered. The prayer is actually answered by Patrick Hill, and now the Trojans are in the red zone. Can they score on the next play, though? Spence fires, and it's caught! Touchdown, USC! And Brian Thompson is going to send this game into overtime. And your defending national champions, they are not quite done yet. So, with that being said, we now jump into overtime. And USC does get the party started with a field goal here. Nothing too crazy. Because while they do get points on the board, if Navy can score a touchdown, here it's barbecue chicken. But 2nd and 10, Navy is going to scramble with their quarterback instead. And Gavin Johnson does get it inside the 15-yard line. But a couple of penalties does bring them back a little bit. So basically 2nd and 15, trying to go for it all in the end zone. But double coverage. And yet here we are. USC is just going to barely survive this first round encounter, and they'll move on to the next round. But who will they face? We'll find that out later. We'll keep the college football playoff rolling here with the champions of the Mountain West taking on the champions of the Big 12 and the Texas Longhorns. Texas was a team that made a somewhat deep run last year, making it to the quarterfinals, while Colorado State, they are certainly happy to be here by all means. Colorado State able to get to the playoff for the very first time, so you love to see that. As now we'll see this Texas Longhorns team go to work, and it's still a pretty close game here initially. Only a 1-point difference separating the Rams and the Longhorns, really showing that that 12-1 record is not all water. They certainly got some substance on that 12-1 record for sure, as Texas is able to score there to make it a 5-point lead. But then 37 seconds left in the first half. Going to find a man deep downfield, and that is going to be Spencer Tyler, who scores for the Longhorns, is able to burn that entire secondary. So Texas gets the ball to start the second half, and they also get momentum to start the second half as well, as Mark Kelly will get the party started here with a 17-yard scamper, as it looked like the Longhorns are on the verge of taking control of this game, and they are certainly doing that with Jason Jackson on the ground, as we'll see Texas find the end zone yet again. And after that, that Longhorns team never looked back as they dominate Colorado State in the first round. So, that being said, we get down to one of our last notable college football playoff matchups here. And this one has a little controversy to it. We know NIU deserves to be here as champions of the MAC. But, that being said, Miami on the other hand, controversially got in over a one-loss Cincinnati. So not only does Miami get a chance to participate as an at-large, they'll also be hosting this game here in sunny South Florida. And right now, Miami living up to expectations. Trevor Eden is going to find the end zone for the Hurricanes. But this Miami team is in for more of a fight than participated. But because even though Miami certainly does have the better roster, there is no sugarcoating that. Miami has the better players. Northern Illinois might have the better coaching staff, or at least they do more with the players on the roster than what Miami has. Now, Tyrell Smoochie Wallace here is going to continue to build upon his school record for most receptions in a career. He might be the first Hurricane receiver ever to have 250 receptions over the span of a college career. But it's not about Tyrell Smoochie Wallace. It's his quarterback, Trevor Veeden, knowing how to use the legs and finding the end zone because of it. That's his second rushing touchdown of the afternoon. Meanwhile, NIU is trying to respond back. Less than 2 minutes left in the first half. So we're going to go deep downfield. He's got a man. That is a huge catch for the NIU offense. Matt Carter getting the offense down the field, and they steamroll all the way down to the goal line where Chris Bowser is going to handle the rest. Not only find the end zone, but somehow finding the lead. So we could be seeing an upset alert on our hands. However, that being said, Trevor Veeden might have something to say about that, as we do see Miami find the end zone yet again. The third rushing touchdown for Trevor Veeden, as that does temporarily give Miami the lead. However, early in the fourth quarter, NIU has a chance to take the lead as Matt Carter gets them down to the goal line. It's going to become an extremely important drive for both teams. Carter's going to hand it off to Chris Bowser, who finds his way into the end zone. Touchdown, Huskies! And NIU scores yet again. And not only will they take the lead, but eventually they're straight up going to pull away from Miami. This is a shocker for sure. Ripple effects felt around the college football world, as NIU will go into Hard Rock Stadium and stun the Miami Hurricanes. Other college football playoff games to keep an eye on as well is that we do see Nebraska beat North Carolina 40-35. And then we'll see Michigan in a surprisingly competitive game against the Bulldogs as well. They only won as a touchdown too. So this does take us into the quarterfinals of the college football playoff, and this is what your bracket's looking like. Texas will go and take on the number 1 seed in Missouri, while USC will advance to take on the number 2 overall seed in Army. And then your other quarterfinal matchups feature NIU taking on Michigan, the champions of the Big Ten, and Florida State, one of the other teams that did pull an upset off. They will go on and take on Nebraska down in Texas for that Cotton Bowl matchup to finalize your college football playoff quarterfinals. And so, with that said, let's go ahead and now check out those quarterfinal games to see who ends up making it into the Final Four. So let's go ahead and jump into that quarterfinal round of the college football playoff. We got Florida State and Nebraska getting things started here first, and towards the end of the first quarter, we are emerging on what could be one of the bigger surprises of the postseason, as Florida State is taking it right to the Nebraska Cornhuskers as they quickly take a 14-0 lead. Now, keeping it going here in the first half, Florida State not only could make it 14-0, they could expand this lead even further than what we have already saw. Let's see how they deal with this first and goal situation, as Terrence Garcia is going to nearly find the end zone there on the quarterback keeper. He's going to be marked just short, though, on that 1 yard line. But on the very next play, a little bit of read option action is going to allow Terrence Garcia to find the end zone yet again. So it's been nothing short of a dominating performance for this Florida State squad, and they could expand this lead even further. Yes, Lance McClellan nearly found the end zone as well for the Florida State Seminoles, who now get a goal line opportunity, as they'll go ahead and hand it up the middle for Dwayne Walden, who will find the end zone. A quick little scamper for the Seminole running back, as Florida State is certainly handling their business right now. But with that being said, this game is certainly very far from being over. Late in the third quarter, Nebraska has a chance to cut the deficit down in half. What they do on this drive is going to be a big determinant factor for that specific piece. As now their quarterback's going to drop back themselves as Logan Yancey's going to fire a dot to Paul Huston. And just like that, Nebraska, they got right back into the game, but it's too little too late as the Cornhuskers ran out of gas, and Florida State might be the Cinderella team. Speaking of those Cinderella teams, we'll see if Northern Illinois could have some luck against the Michigan Wolverines. Michigan looking like a very dominant force, but NIU is going to come out here in these first few minutes of the game, and they are showing that, hey, you know, they might have that big yellow M on their chest, but we are not scared to play against anybody in college football right now. NIU will take that initial lead. However, Michigan, unlike who they went up against in that previous round, they are certainly very well coached, and there's a lot of talent on this Michigan roster as well, including the quarterback who just threw that touchdown pass, Jerome Coker. Jerome Coker is going to set the school record for most passing touchdowns in a single season. He throws his 44th career passing touchdown in this season, and it leads Michigan to go on a dominant run after NIU took that initial lead. Well, Michigan will go on to put up 27 consecutive unanswered points. But even though Michigan goes on this massive run for the majority of those second and third quarters, it does not mean that NIU is done by any stretch of the imagination. Matter of fact, NIU is going to claw back, so much so that when the last closing moments of the third quarter, we get another touchdown for Chris Bowser, and all of a sudden those upset alert bells, they are ringing high and mighty right about now. But if NIU has any chance to pull this upset off, they gotta hold them here. They cannot allow Michigan to get into the end zone yet again, but they did not understand the assignment because Jerome Coker is going to gash NIU pretty well there. And it eventually leads to a first and goal, where a couple of plays later, they go to the tailback, Jeremy Huff, who finds the end zone. Another touchdown for the Michigan Wolverines, as they'll go for the 2-point conversion, making an even 14-point game, as the 2-point conversion actually is going to be unsuccessful. Able to get an interception to back the end zone there. So NIU might have a little bit of life after all. But that being said, gotta play mistake-free football, and they're not going to do it. Not only will they throw an interception here in the critical moments of the game, but also this is going to be returned all the way back. Touchdown by Vincent Huff, as that ultimately seals the deal, as Michigan will end the Cinderella story posted by this Husky squad. But with that being said, we still have a couple of quarterfinal games to get through. Let's start with USC taking on the number 2 seed Army Black Knights. Army, of course, did not play in a first-round game, as they did get to go ahead and get one of those top 2 buys. USC, on the other hand, we just saw them against Navy. So USC taking on both service academies that did make it into the college football playoff, where we will see live in person Victor Spence setting that school record for most passing yards in a career, 12,350 yards, and he has been the standard bearer for USC football over the years. That being said, a few plays later, Victor Spence taking a little bit of a break from the arm and using the legs instead, as the legs will get the first touchdown for USC. And you know what? If it's not broke, why fix anything? Victor Spence will also find the end zone on the ground as well. So a 14-3 lead for those USC Trojans seeking to defend that national championship title. However, that being said, Army might have some other plans. First and goal with 5 minutes left in the half, as Army's going to hand it off to the right-hand side. Tough running for Martin Wyatt. as Martin Wyatt will get Army significantly closer to the end zone. We're on a 2nd and goal. The quarterback's just going to take off and run as Tom Gunn finds the end zone. Army gets themselves right back in it, but it might just be temporarily, though, as Victor Spence marches the USC Trojans right back into scoring position yet again. And this could have big implications going into halftime. But on 1st and goal, they go back to the ground game, as this time Andrew Wilson finds the end zone for the Trojans. But Army, right before we get into halftime here, Army's going to run it up the gut. And surprisingly, it works well. Another touchdown for the Black Knights as we go into halftime here, and it's still a pretty close game. And it will remain a pretty close game for much of the second half, so much so that we actually see Martin Wyatt help Army tie it up against the defending national champions. And it all is going to come down to this 4th quarter all of a sudden, where Andrew Wilson's going to get it going here early in the 4th, going to give USC the lead. But then with 5 minutes left, Army looking to answer back themselves, and they get a pretty good run here for Martin Wyatt, at least a good enough run to go ahead and pick up the 1st down. However, on that very next play, Tom Gunn's going to try to throw it over the middle, and it gets intercepted. And from there on out, USC is able to run out the rest of the clock, and USC will be the ones still defending that national title for now. So, one more quarterfinal matchup that we do have. It's Texas taking on the #1 seed in Missouri. And the beautiful thing about this college football playoff, we don't have any undefeated teams, so it really does feel like this is as open of a national championship hunt that I have seen in quite some time here for the NCSL. It's a very refreshing change of pace. But with that being said, only one of these teams will go to the semifinals, and Jason Jackson's looks to punch Texas' ticket, as they will be the first ones to score here in this quarterfinal between these two teams. And matter of fact, why not do a little bit of double dipping, as Jason Jackson will score yet again for the Texas Longhorns, now making it to a point where Texas actually has a somewhat commandable lead in the first half. And it almost makes you wonder if Texas is actually going to run away with it, or will Missouri find themselves here in the second half? And so far, if you are a Missouri fan, this is not an encouraging answer to see, as Texas scores yet another one. The Missouri Tigers, well, they just might be in some deep trouble. So here we are late in the 3rd quarter. We finally get to check in on a Missouri red zone opportunity, as the Tigers have struggled to move the ball down the field with any sort of consistency in this entire game. But when the game is starting to matter the most, Missouri starts to pick it up. That triple option attack really starting to wear down this Texas front 7, and it's really starting to pay dividends, because they show some cojones. They go for it on 4th down, and it works beautifully, as Fabian Francis is able to find the end zone. Touchdown, Tigers! And even with Texas getting a field goal, it will not stop Missouri from driving down the length of the field and putting the final stake in the heart of the Texas Longhorns, as Missouri comes back from down 18 in the second half to take down the Texas Longhorns and advance to the semifinals. So this is now what your Final Four is going to look like. One of these 4 teams will be your champion here in year number 6. Will it be Missouri out of the American, Michigan out of the Big Ten, Florida State coming in from the SEC? Or will it be your defending national champions, the USC Trojans, hailing from the Pac-12? Let's go ahead and dive into these semifinal matchups to determine who's going to be going to that national championship game. Nothing is your score as Missouri desperately tries to remain in this game. This is a real danger zone moment for the Missouri Tigers. They simply have to come away with points here on this red zone opportunity. 3rd and inches, they'll hand it off to the tailback who's going to rumble and stumble his way inside that 2-yard line roughly. It's been a difficult first half for Derek Leonard, but they'll go to him one more time as he will get the Missouri Tigers on the board. He will get the first points for the Missouri Tigers. So, moving over to the 4th quarter, it's 23-10 here. Pretty similar score, but Michigan could completely put some finishing touches on this game rather quickly, as Michigan will drive down to the goal line quickly as they'll run it in with Jeremy Huff. Another touchdown for the Wolverines, as it could very well be barbecue chicken as we get into the final 2 minutes. And at this point, Missouri playing for pride, and they get a prideful score to the FCS transfer Peter Bowen. But Michigan was simply too much, and they'll be moving on to the national championship game. However, who will have the other national championship slot? Will it be Florida State, or will it be your defending national champions in USC? Let's go ahead and dive right into it now. First 3 minutes of the game, and Florida State almost scores first with Michael Tremaine, the custom receiver. A little bit on the short side, but he's definitely a very skillful receiver, able to pick up 8 yards on that reception, as Florida State will indeed take an early 7-0 lead. They are certainly not scared of the defending national champions, but you already know, if you're going to beat the defending national champs, you got to come out here and really bring that A game, and USC definitely brought theirs. Florida State looking to drop back as they try to reclaim the lead here in the red zone, as Steve Casey is going to be forced out of bounds, but will nearly pick up the first down off of the play action. And it'll eventually set up a goal line situation where Michael Tremaine's going to keep it on the run, might run into the end zone, but he's going to be stuffed at the 1-yard line. Almost gets a rushing touchdown here in the semifinal, but it won't take very long to add points on the board as they go up the gut with Dwayne Walden, who was going to find the end zone. Touchdown Seminoles! So just like that, Florida State is going to take the lead. And we still have 3 more quarters of action. Could be a fun semifinal, as both Florida State and USC, they are both just coming back and forth. They are both just throwing punches at each other right now. A 14-all game as we dive deeper into the second quarter. Florida State again looking to take the lead. And how about this run by Travis Beach? He is not messing around and finding out. He puts the Seminoles in a goal line situation, as again they'll run triple option, trying to run it inside, still on his feet, and Terrence Garcia is not gonna be denied. Touchdown Seminoles! He does get a little bit shaken up on that run, so hopefully it's not too severe of an injury. It would be a big loss for Florida State if that is the case, but Florida State does have a 7-point lead going into the final moments of the first half, but USC trying to put something together before we go into halftime. 3rd and long, last play of the half. Spence got time, fires, and it's caught by Patrick Hill in the final moments of the first half, and we will have a tie ball game going into that 3rd quarter. So here we are in that 3rd quarter of action, as both teams are still very closely together right now. This game could literally go in either direction. 2nd and goal now. Victor Spence looks to give USC their first lead of the day, and they will with Tony Mitchell. He finds the end zone with 3:32 left in the 3rd quarter, giving USC their first lead of the game, but it might not last very long though, as Florida State is able to drive down the field for yet another red zone opportunity, as now there's a critical 3rd down coming up, as Terrence Garcia does come back into the game and throws a dot. That was very tight coverage. That would normally be intercepted, but just get it into where only his receiver can make a play, and it helps Terrence Garcia set that school record for most passing yards in a season. Only Florida State quarterback with 4,200 yards or more. But most importantly, the Seminoles have the lead once again. However, USC is knocking on the door once again. His 3rd and 12 is coming right up. Spence got some time to throw. Dancing around in the pocket. Fires over the middle and it's caught! Touchdown USC! And Patrick Hill is going to set a school record for most receiving touchdowns in a season. That is his 17th. And it gives USC ultimately the win, as that game-winning score sends USC to the national championship. So the Trojans are now just one game away from repeating as national champions, but the Michigan Wolverines still stand in the way. So here we go, 15-1 both of these teams are, and the winner getting to host that national championship crown as we get ourselves live out to SoFi Stadium. And even though we are in the sunny Hollywood, Los Angeles, we got a pretty even crowd here. Michigan and USC both bringing plenty of fan support for this national championship opportunity. Let's go and dive right into it. Early in the first quarter, Jake Coker looking to go to work early and throws a nice little ball over to Mario Sims, who does make this next 2nd down play a whole lot easier to convert on, only needing 2 yards for the 1st down. And they're going to choose to pass for it and firing over the middle again to Mario Sims, who scores the first points of the national championship game. And it fuels Michigan to have an extraordinarily strong first half. One that will see the Michigan Wolverines able to take a commanding lead. They really are giving USC a black eye. But the defending national champs, there's a lot of experience coming back from that Season 5 national championship team. They can throw some punches as well. And that has been evident throughout this entire season. USC will score there, and even with a field goal, they'll get it down to just a 1-possession game. However, Jet Anderson, who had to come in for the backup and Coker, Jake Anderson is going to put Michigan at arm's length, able to throw his 2nd passing touchdown of the day. And while Victor Spence, he didn't play terrible in this game, he certainly needed to rise to a higher level. Let's see if he can do that in these last couple of drives, as they will go for the 2-point conversion. Spence got some time. He is successful with that 2-point conversion. So USC did try to surge, but it was just too little too late, as Michigan is able to take down the national champions, and we will have a new champion crowned once again. We are still looking for a team that is looking to go back-to-back for those national championship crowns, as there is your player of the game, Chaz Edmonds, running for over 220 yards in the ball game, as that crown is going to be hoisted by the Michigan Wolverines. But yeah, we will still be looking for our first team to go back-to-back. Might have to just wait simply a little bit longer, but Michigan completes the journey and ends up being your national champions here in year number 6. So this is what the final college football playoff bracket is going to look like. An incredible journey for Michigan, beating Mississippi State, taking down Northern Illinois, Missouri, and then of course USC in that national championship game. Do want to give a quick shout out though to Florida State, who made it all the way to the semifinals as an 11 seed. They were certainly a Cinderella in this tournament. But with that being said, we now take a look at some of the notable highlights in the offseason as we now prepare to get into season number 7. So it was truly an excellent season to watch. So real quick, let's go ahead and jump into who are our award winners here in year number 6. So in this year number 6 of the NCSL, we do have a new Heisman Trophy winner. We do have Terrence Garcia out of Florida State, who did end up winning the Heisman Trophy. And it wasn't the only trophy that he won either. He also ended up winning the Maxwell Award as well. very much deserved, as he accounted for 42 passing touchdowns as well as 20 touchdowns on the ground as well. Other Heisman candidates of note include Victor Spence. Victor Spence has won multiple awards over his college career, but he does end up winning the Walter Camp and the O'Brien Award. He finished as the runner-up for the Heisman Trophy. Justin Jackson finished in third as a freshman. This is his first time on the field, and Jackson gets it. Also ends up winning the Doak Walker Award. It really sets up sky-high expectations for the rest of his time at Nebraska. The other two Heisman candidates were Damon Norman, the junior quarterback out of West Virginia. He was playing for the Charlotte 49ers this season. And then we also have Kyle Williams, the junior quarterback out of Brentwood, Pennsylvania, who ended up playing for the Pittsburgh Panthers. So in terms of other guys that we didn't get a chance to necessarily talk about, this is what we have going on in terms of these other award winners as well. For the Bednarik, it's going to go to Ryan Mooney, the junior redshirt out of the University of Florida. He had 5 forced fumbles over the course of the season. Do have at least one of your custom guys in here as well. Drew Peebles, he's a sophomore out of Crystal, Minnesota. He actually ends up finishing 5th as a Bednarik Award finalist, the highest sophomore on the Bednarik list. He does, however, end up winning the Nagurski Award, and he beats out a bunch of juniors and seniors in the quest to do so. As for the Blinokoff, this year the Blinokoff is going to go to sophomore wide receiver Steve Brown. Steve Brown had a historic season for the Ohio Bobcats, playing so much higher than his overall. Steve Brown finishes his sophomore campaign with 178 catches, 2,300 yards, and 21 touchdowns as well. And this was someone that did not even see the field as a freshman last year, when he had a chance to not be redshirt, and he was also redshirt as well. As for the Mackey Award, it's going to go to Adam Smith, the junior tight end out of Wisconsin. The Coconut, Ohio product finished with 700 yards receiving, but was an absolute red zone threat though. He finished with 18 touchdowns this year. As for the Outland Trophy, it's going to go to Trevor Johnson, the senior out of USC, who had 10 times as many pancakes as sacked allowed this year. Got a couple of FCS transfers on this list though. You got Clay Cannon, who is here out of Michigan. And then you also got Greg Miniacci, a senior out of Clemson, who had some injury concerns but still had an excellent season. For the Remington Award, it's going to go to Nick McCollum, the senior redshirt out of San Diego State. The Waynesboro, Pennsylvania product finished with 28 pancakes and 9 sacks allowed this year. Meanwhile, the Lombardi Trophy goes to Quinton Ross, the junior out of Nebraska. Hailing from Nampa, Idaho, he finished with 6 sacks as well as a fumble recovery plus a forced fumble. His teammate Drew Peebles, who did win a separate award, actually finishes as the runner-up. An excellent season for the Nebraska defensive line. As for the Butkus Award, it's going to go back to Ryan Mooney. Forepay Award is going to go to Aaron Watkins, the senior out of Texas. He had 3 touchdowns this year defensively. The Groza Award is going to go to Dwayne Young, the junior kicker out of the national champion Michigan Wolverines. He was almost perfect on the season on his extra points. And then you have the punter, the Cal Guide Award. Austin Vogel is going to get it as a true freshman. Helped lead Florida State with his punting and field position game, nearly leading them to the national title game. Finally, the Jet Award goes to the best return man in college football, and that's going to go to Anthony Walden, the senior out of Panama City, Florida. While Anthony Walden struggled to get on the field very much as a wide receiver, he did make his impact felt as a dynamic return man for the Bears. Do have a couple of other guys on here. Peter Bowen, who is an FCS transfer. He finishes 4th this year in the Jet Award. And you also have one of your guys as customs, actually, Josh Walker Jr. Josh Walker Jr. was someone that, again, was another person that hardly found the field when the offense was getting its run. But when it comes to returning things, he was certainly their guy for the Oregon Ducks. And then real quick, I do want to go ahead and show what we have going on for the first team All-Americans. Drew Peebles does make it as a first team All-American at that defensive tackle position. So you do love to see that representing well for the custom guys. And then here is your second team All-American list. Vinny Midnight makes it as a second team All-American. The South Alabama Jaguars really struggled here in season number 6. It was a disappointing year, but Vinny Midnight still had an excellent season. He broke out with 1,800 yards receiving, plus 14 touchdowns on the season. He might consider going pro at the end of his season. More to follow on that. And then here is what the rest of the second team All-American list does look like. Nelson Bullock, a senior at Florida State, does also get those second team All-American honors, was a 3-year starter for the Florida State Seminoles, and was a good starter for this Florida State football team. Here's the final second team All-Americans who ended up getting up on here as we are rounding out this group. And then last thing that I wanted to show you guys before we got into, this coaching carousel, as well as taking a look at the recruiting rankings, getting ready for season 7, who were your NCSL leaders here in year number 6. So, Victor Spence did end up leading the NCAA with 5,094 passing yards. There was actually another person with 5,000 yards though, and that was Jake Coker out of Michigan. And honestly, Coker probably would have had the NCSL lead had he not gotten hurt in that national championship game. But I'm sure he's going to like the ring more than being a statistical leader. Leonard out of Missouri does lead the way for the Missouri Tigers in terms of rushing yards. But Huff out of Michigan and Vincent Cooper were actually not too far behind. They were both less than 100 yards away from that rushing title. Receiving yards, Sean Brown, only person in America with more than 2,000 receiving yards, so really should not be any surprise there. Tackles, Johnson actually led the NCSL with most solo tackles, was actually the only person with more than 80 solo tackles throughout the campaign. Sack leaders, we have a 3-way tie for sack leaders, and that is going to be McDougal out of South Alabama, Vincent out of Army, and then Thomas out of Iowa. They all had 12.5 sacks this year, but no clear champion. For interceptions, Leslie was killing it for the Louisville Cardinals. He led the NCSL with 10 interceptions on the season. And finally, the person that had the longest kick in the NCSL goes to 4 different people. Hughes out of UCF, Dunn out of Eastern Carolina, Price out of Iowa State, and then for the Chanticleers, Hutchinson out of Coastal Carolina. All hit a 56-yard field goal at some point during the season. So now we get into one of the big pieces of the offseason, and that is getting into what's that coaching carousel is going to look like. And we start things off with Army. Now, Army had a pretty good season led by Jeff Monken. Army's coach has retired though, so it opens up some big spots right away. Timmy Chang is going to be selected to be the new head coach of Army. He's coming from Colorado State, where he led the Colorado State Rams to the college football playoff as champions of the Mountain West. We're going to build a momentum for Army. As for Notre Dame did end up firing Marcus Freeman. Even though Notre Dame did have a decent year, Rob Sale, the offensive coordinator from Michigan, will be the new head coach at the University of Notre Dame. As for Northern Illinois, Sean Ogano actually did end up retiring at the age of 68, but Northern Illinois did decide to hire from within. They hire Will Harris, who was the defensive coordinator on this team. Meanwhile, Colorado State, after they lost Timmy Chang to the Army Black Knights, also decided to hire from within. They hired Jamal Robinson, the defensive coordinator from Colorado State as well. As for the Stanford Cardinal, after Phil Stewart was fired for going 1-11 this past season, they end up hiring the defensive coordinator out of Michigan in Cornelius Jones. He's going to look to try to turn this Stanford team around. Kalen DeBoer also had his contract extended for 5 years for the Oregon State Beavers. Kentucky ends up firing Neil Brown after going 2-10 this past season. They'll now look to Bo Jefferson, who was the offensive coordinator for the Midshipmen this past season. Meanwhile, Isaac Thompson has done an excellent job being the offensive coordinator for the Northern Illinois Huskies, and so he's going to parlay that into his first head coaching job. He is now going to be promoted to be the head coach of the Maryland Terrapins, who are coming off of a 3-9 season under Sam Gregg. As for the Kansas State Wildcats, they are going to be looking for a complete rebuild, as they went 0-12 this year in the American. So Shaw Wood is gone, and they hire Steve Cannon, the defensive coordinator from Cincinnati, to try and turn things around. However, James Tompkins is actually going to be considered for the Michigan offensive coordinator job. Michigan, of course, winning the national championship here in year number 6. And with that, they will have your offensive coordinator, James Tompkins, one of your custom coaches, by the way, who will become the new coordinator for the Michigan Wolverines. And then, of course, Doug Rose, who had that excellent season with Western Kentucky, help guide a Hilltoppers offense that nearly won the MAC. That being said, he could parlay this into a offensive coordinator job at UCLA. And you see the history at UCLA. Lots of good history here. And so, going to take him up on this offer for sure, joining this UCLA team. However, the fired head coach from Stanford in Phil Stewart will get another opportunity to head coach, actually, as he lands on his feet to now coaching at Georgia Southern, who went 2-10 this past season. Florida Atlantic will also have a new head coach as well, as after their 3-9 campaign, they turned to the defensive coordinator from Marshall, Mike Houston, to try and rebuild this FAU program. Marshall quietly had a great year as well, going 10-3. The Toledo Rockets are also going to be looking to get out of the basement of college football after their 3-9 campaign. So they end up hiring the defensive coordinator out of Memphis, in Lou Esposito, whose Memphis squad did go 9-4 this last year. Texas State will also be looking for its new head coach as well, as Brent Pry retired at the age of 69, which is a very nice age. They will now turn to Kevin Johns, the offensive coordinator at Charlotte, who had that good 9-4 campaign for the 49ers. With that being said, Northwestern is arguably one of the worst teams in college football right now, and they're going to turn to Brandon Streeter, who was fired from Toledo after a 3-9 campaign, and is going to be entrusted to lead yet another college football program, a Northwestern squad that went 0-12 over the course of season number 6. As for Old Dominion, they're going to once again hire a brand new head coach. Charles Huff was fired after a 1-11 season, and this was his only year with the team. They are now going to go to Jason Silva, and Jason Silva actually was unemployed last year, so the Monarchs are indeed a poverty program. Speaking of poverty programs, the Golden Flashes of Kent State could be considered one as well. After going 1-11, they now turn to Sam Gregg, who was literally just fired from Maryland this past season after a 3-9 campaign himself. As for Akron, here's another poverty program that just went 1-11 those recruiting classes are looking like, and Miami is going to bounce back after a tough recruiting year last season. They rebound by signing the #1 recruiting class, which is what they're going to need as they were bounced in the first round. However, the defending national champions are not going anywhere as they signed the #2 overall recruiting class. USC signs the 3rd best class as they were making a trip to the national championship. Texas signs a top 5 class as well, and rounding out your top 5 is the Georgia Bulldogs. Continuing on the top 25 list, you got Ohio State, who had that down season, but they should rebound nicely here in year number 7. Auburn went 4-8, but the class that they signed is going to help them be a bowl eligible team next season, I would imagine. Nebraska looks to continue its foothold in the American with the #8 recruiting class. Florida State looking for those last couple of pieces to get over that final hump as they made it all the way to the semifinals. And rounding out the top 10 is the Navy Academy. Navy, your champions of the Conference USA, signed the #10 overall class. Now, outside the top 10, you got Iowa at 11. The Iowa Hawkeyes did make it to the college football playoff for the very first time in this series. Missouri also making its first playoff appearance, and they made it to the semifinals of the college football playoff. At number 13 is Bowling Green, and it seems like there's a theme here. Maybe could be seeing the American Conference getting significantly better moving forward. Penn State is number 14. That's a good football team in the Conference USA. Minnesota will look to bounce back from their 7-5 campaign as they signed the number 15 overall recruiting class. Oklahoma ranked in the top 25 and do the same thing in terms of recruiting their 16th ranked recruiting class. Hopefully they can get better defensively so that they don't earn in so many shootouts. Cal was a decent team last season. They had finished with the 17th class. Nevada was at 18. Ole Miss had that little bit of a fall off, but they should bounce back with the number 19 overall class. North Carolina, they made that surprise trip to the college football playoff, upsetting Wake Forest, and they parlayed that into a few 5-star players going to Chapel Hill. Sure, the Tar Heels are absolutely excited about that. Running out the top 25, though, is Washington at 21, Arkansas at number 22, the Army Academy at number 23. They made it to the quarterfinals. Tennessee at number 24, and rounding out your group is Virginia Tech at number 25 in this year's recruiting rankings. Now, with that said, there is a couple of other recruiting classes that I quickly wanted to touch up on. Colorado State made that amazing run to the college football playoff, winning the Mountain West, but they struggled in recruiting, though. They struggled by signing only the number 76 ranked recruiting class in the country. They do sign a few blue chip players, but I would not be surprised if Colorado State kind of fell back to earth within that Mountain West. Seems like we have a different champion every year. And then Mississippi State, they won the Sun Belt this year, so you would think that players would want to come and play at this school, but not the case here at all. Mississippi State signs actually one of the worst classes in the entire country. They signed the 122nd ranked recruiting class in college football. Little bit of a red flag, so maybe we see some order restored in the Sun Belt in the coming years. This might be a one-time fling. But guys, that is going to wrap things up here for some NCSL action. I hope you enjoyed this episode, saw some of the feedback, and I think we might have something cooking here leading into EA college football. Not trying to spoil anything, but you know, more to come on that. We still got a couple of seasons of NCSL that I do want to get through, so you'll see hopefully season number 7 somewhat soon. I'm gonna start working on that as soon as I finish recording this here, but I hope you've been enjoying this. It's a little bit different than what I've typically done in the past, but I'm glad that you guys are enjoying it. And if so, make sure you go ahead and do a couple of things. Smack that like button. And if you want to follow us through the launch of EA College Football, I highly encourage you to hit that subscribe button, because you made it to the end of this video, you're already hanging out with us, might as well make a good time a long time, you know what I'm saying? So we truly appreciate both those things. And with that being said, this is John Jake Gaming on the mic signing off, but hoping you guys are all out there having a good one. Take care, everybody.